Hello. Hello. Oh, I forgot my sweater jacket. It's fine. Hello, everyone. Hi, hi, hi. How are we doing? I'm doing all right. It's always that like last minute like push, that last minute forgetful thing, you know? You could be as ready as you could possibly be, and you're not. Exciting news that I saw on Twitter. Oh, you're glad. Yeah, yeah. I feel that. Yeah, take the time that you need. It's just as much as a job as every other job. So on Twitter today, I saw that they have started working on a television series adaptation of Twilight. Hey, Wadsworth. I am really excited because exactly, it could totally be a thing. And there are two possibilities that would make it super fun to watch. One, it's really amazing. It's so good and a fun romp to watch. Or two, it's terrible. It's a 1 out of 10 stars. But being terrible still makes it fun to watch. If it's like a middle of the road show, it won't be as exciting, but I don't think it will be. I think it'll either be terrible or really fun. Yes. Yes. It's been 15 years. That is insane. Yes. 15 years. It's time for the resurgence. It's time for new fans. I'm ready for it. I'm ready. I don't know where it's going to be filming or where it's going to be like on, but we'll see. Yeah. Yeah. To be clear, it I did not mistake it. So we'll see. I am excited and curious to see what happens. To see what happens. Yes, I was definitely one of the people, one of the masses who was swept up in the excitement of it. And now I just laugh because it's so silly. But I am excited to see when it comes out what it's going to be like. But that was my exciting news for today. I saw it on Twitter, immediately retweeted it, and was like, "You have my attention. Please tell me more." Yeah, yeah, it can be very draining in all senses of the word, for sure. For sure. Oh my gosh, I am so dehydrated. I know I just put this down, but I am extremely dehydrated. I'm pretty sure I only drink water when I'm streaming, which is why I always need a bio break. Because I only drink water in these 3 hours that I stream, and my body's like, what is happening? What is this substance? Not at all, Noodles. You're not being a baby at all. Not one little bit. Feel your feelings, you know? Feel your feelings. That's it. That's all I can say. Okay. That was my news. I have no other stories, no other news. Well, for sprints, which will be tomorrow, I am going to be reading tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and I'm very excited about it. The only thing I know about it is that it has to do with two people who create a video game, and that is all I know. So, and I read the back, and it takes, which I never read the back before starting something, but it takes place, like, the span of the book is 30 years, which is insane. So that's cool. We'll see. We'll see. Books that it's hard. I don't want to be preach judgmental. Books that have a larger span is are hard. It's hard to, unless there's like a time skip, but it's hard to get that like growth and development to make reactions in like the later period seem like they are warranted or worthy or anything like that. Like, because even if there is a time skip, it has to have a really good setup for the projection to seem realistic, if that makes sense. So we'll see how it goes. Oh no, Noodles, I left early. Oh, that makes me sad. I wish I stayed. Oh, I'll have to watch the VOD of it. Captain Hardship, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. And I just watched the clip that you did when I'm rowing like a baby. If that song doesn't hit, the top 40, I'm gonna be disappointed. We gotta find those secrets. Exactly. We gotta find the secrets. There are many secrets that are left unfound, and quite frankly, that's what keeps me up at night. So we will be doing that. Absolutely. I just got this game because it was on sale. It's called A Short Hike, and it looks adorable. You're a little bird hiking around, and that's all I want. That's all I want in life. And it's like very low key. Like you can hike as fast up to the summit as you want to, but you can also just like go fishing and like talk with all of the other people hiking and or animals hiking. And it seems really fun, and you can soar around and stuff because you're a bird. I'm like a bird. I only fly away. I don't know where my home is. I don't know where my soul is. But baby, all I need from you is I'm like a bird. No truer words have been said. All right, enough with the silly. Uh, a fishing game with an interesting backstory called Dredge. Hmm. The fact that you paused when you said interesting backstory makes me pause. I'll look into it though, for sure. Tonight, we are reading none other than Don Quixote. We're starting with chapter 33 today. So we're on page 272. And let's see if I remember what happened last time. Let's see. The hardest part about remembering this is that it's so like it's gonna sound silly, but so story based that I forget like which part we started with the last time to where it like ends. But okay. So, oh, I remember. We met a new character, which I totally forgot her name. I forgot her name, but she is involved on the other side of the story of Cardenio, who we met in the mountains. So she was Don Fernando promised to marry her and then ran off and married Lucinda, who is Cardenio's love. And we meet her, she tells her sad story, and now that she's like in the mountains hiding because her name has been sullied, her parents like don't want her, like all of that sort of stuff. And so now Cardenio and what's her name? I really don't remember her name. It'll pop up. The name that is in the book now is a fake name because obviously. But they decided that they are both going to go back together because Lucinda has been promised to Cardenio and Don Fernando has been promised to what's her name? So that is like the real reason that she's going. However, they have decided, the priest and the barber, who one of them was dressed up like a maiden in distress, have been like, you are indeed a female. You can be our maiden in distress, our damsel in distress. So the ruse is she's pretending to need a giant to be slain, slew, slayed, something. One of those words. And so goes up to Don Quixote and was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking for you everywhere. Your name has been Slawn. Thank you. Your name has been all over the countries and blah blah blah. I finally found you. I need you to slawn this giant that has been taking over our village." And Don Quixote is like, "Well, obviously, because I am a knight-errant. Let's let's go. Let's let's do it." And so they are now traveling to go do that. And on the way to this fake country, this fake town, they stop in Don Quixote and Sancho Panza's actual village, like their actual place, their home, if you will. And that is the barber and the priest's like main like plot, is to get them to go there so that they can keep them there because Don Quixote is crazy and whatever and blah blah blah. And also on their travels, they stop at the inn where Sancho Panza was thrown in a blanket and everything, and there was like that whole like cartoonish fight. And the innkeeper and everybody there are talking about how much they love chivalry books, but they aren't at the level of Don Quixote because they know that even though all of this is true, knights errant is from a past era. They're not around now. So I think that may be where we've ended. Let's see, let's see, let's see. Oh no, that is not where we've ended because we are about to read a book within a book. So they're at the inn right now, and they have found this book that somebody left, and it started out great. And they're like, "Oh, well, we must read it. We need to take it." And the innkeeper is like, "No, you can't take it because I promised that I would keep it. Like, I promised myself that I would keep it until the author comes back, and then I can return it." So they're like, "Well, it's amazing. Can we at least like read it out loud?" So that's what's about to happen. The last chapter ends with, "Well then, pay careful attention, for this is how the novel begins." So we're going to get the first little bits of this novel that was left behind at the end. And that's where we are. Mowing that slawn twice a month. You get it. Why must our love always be star-crossed? Okay. Yes. Tell me your question. The Slawn Mower. Perfect. I can't wait to see it. Is Romeo and Juliet a romance or a tragedy? It is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. Yeah, for sure. I think. Just because like it ends in like miscommunication and, death. Is that a spoiler to say that Romeo and Juliet ends tragically? I don't know. I've already spoiled a season of Dexter on this stream. On a previous stream. I don't know. I think it's a tragedy. Especially if we're going by the, well, yeah, I would say it's a tragedy. Also, all these 30 somethings who love, yes, about 15-year-olds ending themselves. Yeah. That is also tragic. Yeah, I don't see it as a romance. I don't, and I've never really like idolized their romance, or wished for a romance that was as deep as theirs. or longingful as theirs. And this is, totally personal preference or opinions. Yeah, no, I always thought that their romance was extremely silly. It's a great story, absolutely. But yeah, it's just not great. Romeo and Juliet is perhaps one of the most misunderstood stories, right up there with Fight Club. That is quite the hot take. Amazing. Amazing. I'll allow it. I'll allow this hot take. That's fine. I'm not upset. Okay. Chapter 33, which recounts the novel of The Man Who Was Recklessly Curious. There's a footnote, and it says, this is the first of what are called the interpolated novels. In contemporary terms, they are novellas, in the first part of Don Quixote. The story is derived from an episode of Canto 43 and Ariosto's Orlando Furioso. There are indications in the second part of Don Quixote that Cervantes was criticized for these interruptions of the action. All right. In Florence, a rich and famous Italian city in the province called Tuscany, lived two wealthy, eminent gentlemen who were such good friends that they were known by everyone as the two friends. They were bachelors, young men who were of the same age and habits, all of which was sufficient cause for both of them to feel a mutual, reciprocal friendship. True, Anselmo was somewhat more inclined to amorous pursuits than Lothario, whose preferred pastime was the hunt, but when the occasion presented itself, Anselmo would leave his pleasures to follow those of Lothario, and Lothario would leave his to pursue those of Anselmo. And in this fashion their desires were so attuned that a well-adjusted clock did not run as well. Anselmo was deeply in love with a distinguished and beautiful girl from the same city, the daughter of such excellent parents, and so excellent in and of herself, that he decided, with his friend Lothario's agreement, without which he did nothing, to ask her parents for her hand, which he did. His intermediary was Lothario, and he concluded the arrangements so successfully for his friend that in a short time Anselmo found himself in possession of what he desired. Camilla was so happy at having Anselmo for a husband that she unceasingly gave her thanks to heaven and to Lothario, through whose intervention so much contentment had come to her. In the first days of the nuptial celebrations, which are always filled with joy, Lothario continued to visit the house of his friend Anselmo as he had before, wishing to honor him, congratulate him, and rejoice with him in every way he could. But when the celebrations were over, and the frequency of visits and congratulations had diminished, Lothario carefully began to reduce the number of his visits to Anselmo's house, for it seemed to him, as it reasonably would seem to all discerning people, that one should not visit or linger at the houses of married friends as if both were still single, although good and true friendship cannot and should not be suspect for any reason. The honor of the married man is so delicate that it apparently can be offended by his own brothers, let alone his friends. Anselmo noticed Lothario's withdrawn and complained to him bitterly, saying that if he had known that matrimony meant they could not communicate as they once had, he would never have married, and if the good relations the two of them had enjoyed when he was a bachelor had earned them the sweet name of the two friends, then he would not, merely for the sake of appearing circumspect, and for no other reason, permit so well-known and amiable a name to be lost. Therefore he begged Lothario, if such a term could legitimately be used between them, that he make Anselmo's house his own again, and come and go as he had before, assuring him that his wife, Camilla, had no wish or desire other than what he wanted her to have, and she, knowing how truly the two men had loved each other, was bewildered at seeing him so aloof. To these and the many other arguments that Anselmo used to persuade Lothario to visit his house as he had in the past, Lothario responded with so much prudence, discretion, and discernment that Anselmo was satisfied with his friend's good intentions, and they agreed that twice a week, and on feast days, Lothario would eat with Anselmo in his house, and although this was their agreement, Lothario resolved to do no more than what he thought would enhance the honor of his friend, whose reputation he valued more than he did his own. He said, and rightly so, that the man to whom heaven was granted a beautiful wife had to be as careful about the friends he brought home as he was about the women with whom his wife associated, because those things not done or arranged on open squares or in temples or at public festivals or on devotional visits to churches, activities that husbands may not always deny to their wives, can be arranged and expedited in the house of their most trusted friend or kinswoman. Lothario also said that a married man needed to have a friend who would alert him to any negligence in his behavior, since it often happens that because of the great love the husband has for his wife, and his desire not to distress her, he does not warn or tell her to do so. He does not warn or tell her to do or not do certain things that could either redound to his honor or cause his censure. But being advised by his friend, he could easily resolve everything. Where could one find a friend as discerning and loyal and true as the one described by Lothario? Certainly, I do not know. Lothario alone was the kind of friend who, with utmost care and solicitude, looked after his friend's honor, and wished to lessen, reduce, and diminish the number of days he went to his house, so that it would not seem amiss to the idle crowd and its wandering, malicious eyes that a wealthy, noble, and well-born young man, possessing the other good qualities he believed he had, habitually visited the house of a woman as beautiful as Camilla, although her virtue and modesty could put a stop to any malicious tongue. He did not want any doubts cast on her good name or his friends. As a consequence, on most of the visiting days that they had agreed upon, he was occupied and involved in other matters that he claimed were unavoidable, and so a large portion of the time they did spend together was devoted to the complaints of one friend and the excuses of the other. As it happened, on one of these occasions, when the two men were walking through a meadow outside the city, Anselmo said these words to Lothario. "Did you think, Lothario, my friend, that I cannot respond with gratitude that matches the bounty I have received? The mercies God had shown me in making me the son of parents such as mine, and granting me with so generous a hand so many advantages, in what is called nature, as well as in fortune, and especially his granting me you as a friend, and Camilla as my wife, two treasures I esteem, if not as much as I ought to, at least as much as I can. Yet, despite all these elements that usually make up the whole that allows men to live happily, I am the most desperate and discontented man in the entire world, because for some days now I have been troubled and pursued by a desire so strange and out of the ordinary that I am amazed at myself, and blame and reprimand myself, and attempt to silence it and hide it away from my thoughts, though I have been no more capable of being its secret than if my intention actually had been to reveal it to the entire world. And since, in fact, it must be made public, I want to confide and entrust it to you, certain that with the effort you make as my true friend to cure me, I soon shall find myself free of the anguish it causes me, and my joy at your solicitude will be as great as my unhappiness at my own madness." Anselmo's words left Lothario perplexed, and he did not know where so long an introduction or preamble would lead, and although in his imagination he pondered what the desire could be that was troubling his friend, he never hit the mark of the truth, and in order to quickly end the torment that this uncertainty caused him, Lothario said that it was manifestly insulting to their great friendship for Anselmo to go through so many preliminaries before telling him his most secret thoughts, for he was certain he could promise either the advice that would make them bearable, or the remedy that would end them. "What you say is true," responded Anselmo, "and with that confidence I will tell you, friend Lothario, that the desire that plagues me is my wondering if Camilla, my wife, is as good and perfect as I think she is, and I cannot learn the truth except by testing her, so that the test reveals the worth of her virtue, as fire shows the worth of gold. Because it seems to me, dear friend, that a woman is not virtuous if she is not solicited, and that she alone is strong who does not bend to promises, gifts, tears, and the constant importunities of lovers who woo her. Why be grateful when a woman is good?" he said, "if no one urges her to be bad? Why is it of consequence that she is shy and reversed if she does not have the occasion to lose her restraint, and knows she has a husband who, at her first rash act, would take her life? In short, I do not hold the woman who is virtuous because of lack of fear, or fear of opportunity, in the same esteem as the one who is courted and pursued, and emerges wearing the victor's crown. For these reasons and many others, I could mention that support and strengthen this opinion. My desire is for Camilla, my wife, to pass through these difficulties, and be refined and prove her value in the fire of being wooed and courted by one worthy of desiring her. And if she emerges, as I believe she will, triumphant from this battle, I shall deem my good fortune unparalleled. I shall be able to say that the cup of my desires is filled to overflowing. I shall say that it fell to me to have a wife strong in virtue, about whom the wise man says, 'Who will find her?' And if the outcome is the contrary of what I expect, the pleasure of seeing that I was correct in my opinion will allow me to bear the sorrow that my costly experiment may reasonably cause me. And because you can say many things against my desire, but none will succeed in stopping me from realizing it, I want you, my dear friend Lothario, to agree to be the instrument that will effect this plan born of my desire. I shall give you the opportunity to do so, and provide you with everything I think necessary for wooing a woman who is virtuous, honorable, reserved, and not mercenary. Among other reasons, I am moved to entrust you with this arduous undertaking because I know that if Camilla is conquered by you, you will not carry the conquest to its conclusion, but will do only what has to be done according to our agreement, and I shall not be offended except in desire, and the offense will remain hidden in the virtue of your silence, for I know very well that in any matter having to do with me, it will be as eternal as the silence of death. Therefore, if you want me to have a life that can be called a life, you must enter into this amorous battle, not in a lukewarm or dilatory fashion, but with the zeal and diligence that my desire demands, and with the trust assured me by our friendship." Wadsworth, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. These were the words that Anselmo said to Lothario, who listened so attentively to all of them that, except for those that have been recorded here, none passed his lips until Anselmo had finished, seeing that he had nothing else to say, and after looking at him for a long time as if he were looking at something amazing and terrifying that he had never seen before, Lothario said, "I cannot persuade myself, oh my dear friend Anselmo, that the things you said are not a joke. If I had thought you were speaking in earnest, I would not have allowed you to go so far, and if I had stopped listening, I would have forestalled your long, impassioned speech. It surely seems to me that you don't know me, or I don't know you. But no, I know very well that you are Anselmo, and you know that I am Lothario. The problem is that I think you are not the Anselmo you used to be, and you must have thought I was not the same Lothario either, because the things you have said to me would not have been said by my friend Anselmo, and what you have asked of me would not have been asked of the Lothario you knew. Good friends may test their friends and make use of them, as a poet said, usque ad aras, which means that they must not make use of their friendship in things that go against God." And there's a note after usque ad aras, and it says Plutarch attributes the phrase to Pericles. If a pagan felt this about friendship, how much more important is it for a Christian to feel the same, for he knows that divine friendship must not be lost for the sake of human friendship. When a friend goes far as to set aside the demands of heaven in order to respond to those of his friend, it should not be for vain, trivial things, but for those on which the honor and life of his friend depend. Well, Anselmo, tell me now which of these is threatened, so that I can dare oblige you and do something as detestable as what you are asking. Neither one, certainly. Rather, if I understand you, you are asking me to attempt and endeavor to take away your honor and your life, and mine as well. Because if I attempt to take away your honor, it is obvious that I take away your life, for the man without honor is worse than dead. And if, as you wish, I become the instrument that inflicts so much evil upon you, do I not lose my honor, and, by the same token, my life? Listen, Anselmo, my friend, and have the patience not to respond until I finish telling you what I think of the demands your desire has made of you. There will be time for you to reply, and for me to listen. Gladly, said Anselmo. Say whatever you wish. And Lothario continued, saying, It seems to me, my dear Anselmo, that your mind is now in the state in which the Moors have theirs, for they cannot be made to understand the error of their sect, with commentaries from Holy Scripture, or arguments that depend on the national understanding, or are funded on articles of faith. Instead, they must be presented with palpable, comprehensible, intelligible, demonstrable, indubitable examples, with mathematical proofs that cannot be denied, as when one says, if, from two equal parts we remove equal parts, those parts that remain are also equal. If they do not understand the words, as in fact they do not, then it must be shown to them with one's hand, and placed before their eyes. Yet even after all this, no one can persuade them of the truths of my holy religion. I must use the same terms and methods with you, because the desire that has been born in you is so misguided, and so far beyond everything that has a shred of rationality in it, that I think it would be a waste of time to try to make you understand your foolishness. For the moment, I do not wish to give it another name. I am even tempted to leave you to your folly as punishment for your wicked desire, but my friendship for you does not permit me to be so harsh that I leave you in obvious danger of perdition. And so that you can see it clearly, tell me, Anselmo, haven't you told me that I have to woo a reserved woman, persuade an honest woman, make offers to an unmercenary woman, serve a prudent woman? Yes, you have said that to me. But if you know you have a wife who is reserved, honest, unmercenary, and prudent, what else do you need to know? And if you believe she will emerge victorious from all my assaults, as she undoubtedly will, what designations do you plan to give her afterward that are better than the ones she has now? What will she be afterwards that is better than what she is now? Either your opinion of her is not what you say it is, or you do not know what you are asking. If your opinion of her is not what you say it is, why do you want to test her instead of treating her as an unfaithful woman and chastising her as you see fit? But if she is as virtuous as you believe, it would be reckless to experiment with that truth, for when you have done so, it will still have the same value it had before. Therefore, we must conclude that attempting actions more likely to harm us than to benefit us is characteristic of rash minds bereft of reason, especially when they are not forced or compelled to undertake them, and when, even from a distance, it is obvious that the venture is an act of patent madness. One attempts extremely difficult enterprises for the sake of God, or for the sake of the world, or both. Those attempted for God are the ones undertaken by the saints, who endeavor to live the lives of angels in human bodies. Those attempted with the world in mind are undertaken by men who endure such infinite seas, diverse climates, and strange peoples in order to acquire great riches. And those ventured by God and the world together are undertaken by valiant soldiers who, as soon as they see in the enemy defenses in opening no larger than the one made by a cannonball, set aside all fear, do not consider or notice the clear danger that threatens them, and, borne on the wings of their desire to defend their faith, their nation, and their king, hurl themselves boldly into the midst of the 1,000 possible deaths that await them. These are perilous actions that are ordinarily ventured, and it is honor, glory, and advantage to attempt them despite the many obstacles and dangers. But the one you say you wish to attempt and put into effect will not win you the glory of God, or great riches, or fame among men, even if the outcome is as you desire. You will not be more content, more wealthy, more honored than you are now. And if it is not, you will find yourself in the greatest misery imaginable. Then it will be to no avail to think that no one is aware of the misfortune that has befallen you. Your knowing will be enough to make you suffer and grieve. As confirmation of this truth, I want to recite for you a stanza written by the famous poet Luis Tansillo at the end of the first part of his The Tears of St. Peter. And there's a note after Luis. It says, an Italian poet of the 16th century, from 1510 to 1568. And the first part of his The Tears of St. Peter, which says, there grows grief and there grows shame in Peter when the day has dawned, and though he sees no one is near, he feels a deep shame for his sin, for a great heart will be moved to shame, even if unseen, when it transgresses, shame though seen by naught but earth and sky. In similar fashion, you will not escape sorrow even if it is secret. Instead, you will weep constantly, if not tears from your eyes, then tears of blood from your heart, like those shed by the simple doctor who, as our poet recounts, agreed to the test of the goblet, while the prudent and more rational Ronaldos refused. Although this is poetic fiction, it contains hidden moral truths worthy of being heeded and understood and imitated, especially if, in light of what I am going to say to you now, you come to realize the magnitude of the error you wish to commit. And there is a note after agreed to the test of the goblet. It says, in allusion to the story recounted in Orlando Furioso of a magic goblet that indicated if the women who drank from it were faithful. Tell me, Anselmo, if heaven or good luck had made you the possessor and legitimate owner of a fine diamond whose worth and value satisfied every jeweler who saw it, and all of them were of one opinion and said in one voice that in value, size, and purity it was all that such a stone could be, and you believed this as well, having no knowledge to the contrary, would it be reasonable for you to take that diamond and place it between an anvil and a hammer, and by dint of power blows test if it was hard and fine as they said? Moreover, in the event you did this, and the stone withstood so foolish a test, it would not, for that reason, gain in value or fame. But if it shattered, which is possible, wouldn't everything be lost? Yes, certainly, and its owner would be thought a fool by everyone. Then understand, Anselmo, my friend, that Camilla is a fine diamond, both in your estimation and in that of others, and there is no reason to put her at risk of shattering, for even if she remains whole, she cannot become more precious than she is now, and if she fails, and does not resist, consider how you would feel without her, and how correctly you would blame yourself for having been the cause of her ruination and your own. For there is no jewel in the world as valuable as a chaste and honorable woman, and women's honor consists entirely of the good opinion others have of them. Since you know that the good opinion people have of your wife is as high as it can be, Why do you want to cast doubt upon this truth? Look, my friend, woman is an imperfect creature, and one should not lay down obstacles where she can stumble and fall. Instead, one should move them and clear all impediments from her path, so that she may run easily and quickly to reach the perfection she lacks, which consists in being virtuous. I have thoughts. Naturalists tell us that the ermine is an animal with pure white fur, and when hunters want to trap it, they use this trick. Knowing the places where it customarily travels and can be found, they obstruct those places with mud, and then they beat the bushes and drive it towards that spot. And when the ermine reaches the mud, it stops and lets itself be captured and caught rather than pass through the mire and risk soiling and losing the whiteness that it values more than liberty and life. The honest and chaste woman is the ermine, and the purity of her virtue is whiter and cleaner than snow. The man who wants her not to lose it, but to keep and preserve it, must treat her in a manner different from the one used with an ermine. He should not place mud before her. I mean the gifts and wooing of importunate lovers. Because perhaps, and there is no perhaps about it, she does not have enough virtue and natural strength to overcome and surmount those obstacles by herself. It is necessary to remove them and place before her the purity of virtue and the beauty that lies in a good reputation. In similar fashion, the chaste woman is like a mirror of clear, shining glass, liable to be clouded and darkened by any breath that touches it. One must treat the virtuous woman as one treats relics, adore them, but not touch them. One must protect and esteem the chaste woman as one protects and esteems a beautiful garden filled with flowers and roses. Its owner does not permit people to pass through and handle the flowers. It is enough that from a distance, through the iron bars of the fence, they enjoy its fragrance and beauty. Finally, I want to recite for you some verses that have just come to mind. I heard them in a modern play, and I think they are relevant to what we are discussing. A prudent old man was advising the father of a young girl to shelter her, protect her, and keep her secluded, and among many other reasons, he mentioned these. Woman is made of fragile glass, but do not put her to the test, to see if she will break, for that might come to pass. She is too apt to shatter, and wisdom is surely ended, if what can ne'er be mended is put in the way of danger. When I say to you is true, and let us all agree, whatever Danae may be, showers of gold are there too. And there is a note, and it says, Danae was confined to a tower by her father, King Acrisius. When an oracle stated that her son would kill him, Zeus transformed himself into a shower of gold, visited her, and fathered Perseus. What a wild conversation to have, where first of all you're basically just lecturing, and then in the middle of it, to support your points, you just like whip out some poetry and lines from plays that you remember. What a wild conversation you're having. I have never been in a conversation like that. Everything I have said so far, Anselmo, refers to you. Now it is time for you to hear something that has to do with me, and if it takes a long time, forgive me, but it is demanded by the labyrinth into which you have walked, and from which you wish me to free you. You consider me your friend, yet you wish to take my honor, which is counter to all friendships. Not only that, but you want me to try to take yours. It is clear that you want to take mine, for when Camilla sees me wooing her, as you are asking me to do, surely she will look upon me as a man without honor or worth, because I am attempting and doing something so far removed from the obligations I have as a man I am, and as your friend There is no doubt that you want me to take your honor, for when Camilla sees me wooing her, she will think that I saw in her some looseness of behavior that gave me the audacity to reveal my evil desire, and thinking herself dishonored, or dishonor affects you, for you are part of her. For this reason, people commonly say that the husband of an adulterous woman, even though he has no knowledge of wife's adultery, and has given her no reason to be what she should not be, and it was not in his power to prevent his misfortune, for he was neither negligent nor careless. Yet, despite all this, he is called and characterized by base names that revile him, and in a certain sense those who know of his wife's wickedness look at him with scornful rather than compassionate eyes, even though responsibility for his difficulties lies not with him, but with the desires of his unvirtuous wife. But I want to tell you why it is reasonable and just for the husband of an immodest woman to be dishonored, even if he does not know about her lack of virtue, and is not responsible for it, and has not been a party to it, or given her reason to be unchaste. Do not grow weary of listening to me. Everything will redound to your benefit. When God created our first father in the earthly paradise, Holy Scripture says that God put Adam to sleep. And as he slept, he took a rib out of his left side, and from it he formed our mother Eve. When Adam awoke and saw her, he said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." And God said, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." That was when the divine sacrament of marriage was established, with bonds so strong that death alone can undo them. And this miraculous sacrament is so strong and powerful that it makes one flesh of two different people, and in virtuous spouses it does even more, for although they have two souls, they have only one will, and from this it follows that since the flesh of the wife is one of the flesh of the husband, any stain that besmirches her, or any defect that appears in her, redounds to the flesh of the husband, even if he has not given her, as I have said, any reason for her wickedness, just as discomfort in the foot or any other member of the body is felt throughout his entire body because it is all one flesh, and the head feels and the ankles pain although it has not caused it, so the husband participates in his wife's dishonor because he is one with her. And since honors and dishonors in this world are all born of flesh and blood, and those of the unchaste woman are of this kind, it is unavoidable that the husband is party to them, and is considered dishonored, even if he has no knowledge of them. Therefore, consider, Anselmo, the danger in which you place yourself by wanting to disturb the tranquillity in which your virtuous wife lives. Think of how, because of a futile and rash inquisitiveness, you wish to disturb the humors that now rest tranquilly in the bosom of your chaste wife. Be careful that what you may gain is little, and what you may lose is so great that I will not even mention it because I lack the words to describe it. But if everything I have said is not enough to dissuade you from your evil purpose, then you can find another instrument for your dishonor and misfortune, for I do not intend to be that instrument, even if I lose your friendship, which is the greatest loss I can imagine. When he had said this, the virtuous and prudent Lothario fell silent, and Anselmo was left so perplexed and pensive that for some time he could not say a word. But at last he said, "You have seen, Lothario, my friend, how attentively I have listened to everything you wanted to say to me, and in your arguments, examples, and comparisons, I have seen the great discernment you possess and the far reaches of your true friendship. I also see and confess that I do not follow your way of thinking, but pursue my own. I am fleeing the good and going after the bad. Assuming this, you must consider that I suffer now from the disease that afflicts some women, filling them with the desire to eat earth, plaster, charcoal, and other things that are even worse and sickening to look at, let alone to eat. Therefore, it is necessary to use some artifice to cure me, and this could be done with ease if you simply start, even if indifferently and falsely, to woo Camilla, who will not be so fragile that your first encounters will bring down her virtue. I will be content with this simple beginning, and you will have fulfilled what you owe to your friendship, not only by giving me back my life, but by persuading me not to lose my honor. You are obliged to do this for only one reason, being determined, as I am, to make this test a reality. You must not allow me to recount my madness to someone else who would endanger the honor that you insist on my not losing, yours not being as high as it should be, in Camilla's opinion, while you woo her, matters little or not at all, for in a very short time, when we see in her the integrity we desire, you will be able to tell her the truth of our scheme, and this will return your standing to where it was before. Since you risk so little and can make me so happy by taking that small risk, do not refuse to do it, even if greater obstacles are placed before you. As I have said, if you simply begin, I shall consider the matter concluded. Seeing Anselmo resolute, will, and not knowing what other examples to cite or arguments to present that would dissuade him, and hearing that he threatened to tell someone else about his wicked desire, and wanting to avoid an even greater evil, Lothario decided to agree, and do what Anselmo asked. His purpose and intention was to guide the matter in such a way that Camilla's thoughts would not be disturbed, and Anselmo would be satisfied, and therefore Lothario told Anselmo not to communicate his thought to anyone else, and that he would undertake the enterprise and begin whenever his friend wished. Anselmo embraced him tenderly and lovingly, and thanked him for his offer as if Lothario had done him a great favor. The two of them agreed that the plan would begin the following day. Anselmo would give Lothario time and opportunity to speak to Camilla alone, and also provide him with money and jewels to give and present to her. He advised Lothario to play music for her and write verses in her praise, and if he did not wish to take the trouble to do so, Anselmo would write them himself. Lothario agreed to everything, with intentions quite different from what Anselmo believed them to be. And having come to this understanding, they went back to Anselmo's house, where they found Camilla waiting for her husband, troubled and concerned because he came home later than usual that day. Lothario returned to his house, and Anselmo remained in his, and he was as pleased as Lothario was thoughtful, not knowing what course to follow in order to succeed in that rash affair. But that night he thought of how to deceive Anselmo without offending Camilla, and the next day he went to eat with his friend, and was welcomed by Camilla, who always received and treated him warmly, knowing the good opinion her husband had of him. They finished eating, the table was cleared, and Anselmo asked Lothario to stay with Camilla while he went out to tend to a pressing matter. He said he would be back in an hour and a half. Camilla asked him not to leave, and Lothario offered to accompany him, but nothing could sway Anselmo. Instead, he urged Lothario to wait until he returned because he had to discuss a matter of great importance to him. He also told Camilla not to leave Lothario alone while he was out. In short, he knew so well how to feign the necessity of nonsensicality of his absence that no one could have realized it was mere pretense. Anselmo left, and Camilla and Lothario remained alone at the table, because the servants had gone to have their own meal. Lothario saw himself placed in precisely the dangerous position that his friend desired, facing an enemy who, with no more than her beauty, could conquer an entire squadron of armed knights. Lothario surely had good reason to fear her. But what he did was to place his elbow on the arm of his chair and rest his cheek on an open hand, and begging Camilla's pardon for his rudeness,
He said that he wanted to rest a while Anselmo returned. Camilla responded that he would be more comfortable in the drawing room than in the chair, and she asked him to go in there to sleep. Lothario refused, and dozed in the chair until the return of Anselmo, who found Camilla in her bedroom, and Lothario asleep and thoughtful that since he had come home so late, they had already had the opportunity to talk, and even to sleep. He was impatient for Lothario to awaken, so that he could go out again with him and ask if he had been successful. Everything happened as he wished. Lothario awoke, and they left the house together, and Anselmo asked what he wanted to know, and Lothario replied that he had not thought it was a good idea to reveal his intentions completely the first time, and so he had done no more than praise Camilla for her loveliness, saying that the sole topic of conversation throughout the city was her beauty and discretion. This had seemed to him a good start to winning her over, disposing her to listen to him with pleasure the next time by using the stratagem the devil uses when he wants to deceive someone who is weary and vigilant. He transforms himself into an angel of light, though he is an angel of darkness, and hides behind an appearance of virtue until finally he reveals his identity and achieves his purpose, unless the deception is discovered at the very start. This pleased Anselmo very much, and he said he would provide the same opportunity every day, because even if he did not leave the house, he would occupy himself with other matters, and Camilla would not become aware of the ruse. Many days went by, and although he did not say a word to Camilla, Lothario told Anselmo that he was speaking to her, but could never elicit from her the slightest interest in anything unchaste, or the smallest shred of hope. On the contrary, he said she had warned him that if he did not rid himself of evil thoughts, she would have to tell her husband. Good, said Anselmo. So far Camilla has resisted words. It is necessary to see how she resists actions. Tomorrow I shall give you 2,000 gold escudos to offer her, or even give to her, and another 2,000 to buy jewels with which to tempt her. For women, no matter how chaste they are, and especially if they are beautiful, tend to be very fond of dressing well and looking elegant. If she resists this temptation, I will be satisfied, and trouble you no more. Lothario responded that since he had begun it, he would see this undertaking through to its conclusion, although he knew that in the end he would be thwarted and defeated. On the following day he received the 4,000 escudos, and with them 4,000 perplexities, because he did not know what new lies he could tell. But finally he decided to tell Anselmo that Camilla was as steadfast in her resistance to gifts and promises of gifts as she was to words, and there was no reason to expend any more effort, because it was always a waste of time. But fate, which arranged matters differently, decreed that Anselmo, having left Lothario and Camilla alone as he had done so many other times before, hid in a small antechamber and watched and listened to them through the keyhole, and he saw that in over half an hour Lothario did not speak a word to Camilla, and would not have spoken to her if he had been there for a century. And Anselmo realized that everything his friend had told him about Camilla's responses was a fiction and a lie. To see if this really was true, he walked out of the antechamber and called Lothario aside, then asked if there was any news and inquired about Camilla's mood. Lothario replied that he did not intend to take matters further because her responses had been so sharp and unpleasant. He did not have the heart to say anything else to her. "Ah," said Anselmo. Lothario, how badly you have fulfilled your duty to me and responded to the trust I put in you. I have been watching through the keyhole of the door to that room, and I have seen that you did not say a word to Camilla, which leads me to think you have not said even the first word to her. If this is true, as it undoubtedly is, why have you deceived me? And why do you wish by your actions to take from me the only means I have found to satisfy my desire." Anselmo said no more, but what he had said was enough to leave Lothario disconcerted and confused, and taking it almost as a point of honor that he had been discovered in a lie, he swore to Anselmo that from then on he would dedicate himself to satisfying him and not lying to him, as he would see if he were curious enough to spy on him again. Anselmo would not even have to make that effort, however, because Lothario intended to put so much effort into satisfying him that it would eliminate all his suspicions. Anselmo believed him, and in order to give Lothario a more secure and less alarming opportunity, he decided to leave his house for a week and visit a friend who lived in a village not far from the city. Anselmo arranged for his friend to send for him very urgently, so that Camilla would think there was a reason for his departure. Oh, Anselmo, how unfortunate and ill-advised. What are you doing? What are you plotting? What are you arranging? Consider that you are acting against yourself, plotting your own dishonor and arranging your own ruination. Camilla is a virtuous wife. You possess her in peace and tranquility. No one assails your joy. Her thoughts do not go beyond the walls of her house. You are her heaven on earth, the goal of her desires, the fulfillment of her delight, the means by which she measures her will, adjusting it in all things to yours and to that of heaven. If, then, the mine of her honor, beauty, virtue, and modesty gives you, with no effort on your part, all the riches it has, and all that you could wish for, why do you want to dig into the earth and look for more veins of new and unseen treasure, putting yourself in danger of having it all collapse, since, after all, it stands on the weak foundations of her frail nature? Remember that, if a man seeks the impossible, the possible may justly be denied him. A poet said it better when he wrote, "I search for life in dread death, in fearful disease for health, in dark prison for liberty, escape in a sealed room, in a traitor, loyalty, by my own fate from whom I never hope, for the good has with just heaven ruled. If the impossible I demand, for me the possible is banned." The next day Anselmo left for the village, having told Camilla that during the time he was away, Lothario would come to watch over the house and to eat with her, and that she should be sure to treat him as she would himself. Camilla, an intelligent and honorable woman, was distressed by her husband's orders, and said he ought to be aware that, when he was absent, it was not right for anyone to occupy his seat at the table, and if he was doing this because he had no confidence in her ability to manage his house, he should test her this time, and learn through his own experience that she was capable of taking on even greater responsibilities. Anselmo replied that this was his pleasure, and her duty was merely to bow her head and obey. Camilla said she would, although it was against her will. Anselmo left, and on the following day Lothario came to the house, where he was received by Camilla with an affectionate and virtuous welcome. She never put herself in a position where Lothario would see her alone. She was always accompanied by her servants, both male and female, especially a maid named Leonela, whom she loved dearly because they had grown up together in the house of Camilla's parents, and when she married, she brought Leonela with her to Anselmo's house. For the first 3 days, Lothario said nothing to her, although he could have when the table was cleared and the servants left to eat their meal, by Camilla's orders, a hasty one. Leonela had also been instructed to eat before Camilla did, and to never leave her side, but the maid, who had her mind on other affairs more to her liking, and needed that time and opportunity to tend to her own pleasures, did not always obey her mistress in this. Instead, she left them alone, as if that had been her instructions. But Camilla's virtuous presence, the gravity of her countenance, and the modesty of her person were so great that they curbed Lothario's tongue. but the benefit derived from Camilla's many virtues imposing silence on Lothario in fact did harm to both of them, because if his tongue was silent, his mind was active, and had the opportunity to contemplate, one by one, all the exceptional qualities of virtue and beauty in Camilla, which were enough to make a marble statue fall in love, alone, let alone a human heart. Lothario looked at her, when he should have been speaking to her. He thought how worthy she was of being loved, and this thought gradually began in assault on the high regard he had for Anselmo. 1,000 times over he wanted to leave the city and go to a place where Anselmo would never see him, and where Lothario would never see Camilla. The pleasure he found in looking at her had already become an impediment to his doing so. He contended and struggled with himself to resist and reject the joy he felt when he looked at her. When he was alone, he blamed himself for his folly. He called himself a bad friend, even a bad Christian. He reasoned with himself, making comparisons between himself and Anselmo, and he always concluded by saying that Anselmo's madness and trust had been greater than his own scant fidelity, and if this excused him before God as it did before men for what he intended to do, he would not fear punishment for his crime. In short, the beauty and virtue of Camilla, together with the opportunity that her ignorant husband had placed in his hands, overthrew Lothario's loyalty, and without considering anything but what his longing moved him to do, after 3 days of Anselmo's absence, days when he was in a constant struggle to resist his desires, Lothario began to compliment Camilla with so much passion and such amorous words that Camilla was stunned, and all she could do was stand and go to her bedroom without saying a word to him. But not even his brusque behavior could weaken Lothario's hope, for hope is always born at the same time as love. Instead, he held Camilla in even higher esteem, having seen in Lothario what she never imagined she would see. Camilla did not know what to do, but thinking it would not be safe or proper to give him an opportunity to speak again, she resolved that very night to send a servant with a letter for Anselmo, which she did, and in it she wrote these words. End of chapter 33. So I understand the criticism that was mentioned at the beginning of this chapter that Cervantes received in this insertion of a completely different story and novel that takes away and detracts from the action of Don Quixote. Like, what are they actually doing? Is this story going to mirror a story that's happening in Don Quixote later on? I don't know. Is this just painting a picture of what the environment is or what the virtues are? I don't know. But I understand that criticism, especially since I thought that it was just going to be one chapter, but now that it is bleeding into a second chapter now, and who knows how much longer this is going to be, it is interesting. We shall see. And I'm skipping ahead just to see if it goes into another chapter, like if it's taking over 3 chapters. Let's see. Okay, it does not. Oh wait, it does. I was looking at 2 chapters ahead. Okay, so this is going to be taking 3 chapters, so I absolutely understand now the criticism of having this story inserted and that the actions of our characters have just halted, just completely halted as they're all listening to the story, except for Don Quixote, who is in fact sleeping. So I understand. because I am a little bit like, all right, let's get back to the story. But at the same time, it's only slightly different from other like tales that we've had. Like, I'm specifically thinking of, I don't remember her name, but when they are going to the funeral of this one person who just completely fell in love with somebody and it was unrequited, and like that story. I don't, Marcella, is that her name? I really don't know. That was a while ago. I apologize, I really don't remember her name. But for each of these like little mini stories, or even hearing the story about Don Fernando, like that is paused to hear that story. But Cardenio, who is telling the story of Don Fernando, uh, is now part of the story. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I guess I guess we should just keep reading to find out, you know? When in doubt, keep reading. Okay, just adjusting my pillows. All right. Chapter 34, in which the novel of The Man Who Was Recklessly Curious continues. Okay, so these are the words of a letter that Camilla wrote. Just as it is often said that the army without its general seems imperfect, as does the castle without its castellan. I say that the young wife without her husband, when overwhelming reasons do not demand it, seems even worse. I find myself so imperfect without you, and so incapable of enduring this absence, that if you do not return very soon, I shall have to go to the house of my parents for the time you are away, even though I leave yours unguarded, because I believe that the guardian you left me, if that is what he should be called, is more concerned with his own pleasure than with your interests. Since you are clever, I need not say more, nor is it fitting that I do. Anselmo received this letter and understood that Lothario had begun his suit, and that Camilla must have reacted just as he wished. Extraordinarily happy at the news, he responded by sending a message to Camilla, telling her not to leave his house under any circumstances, because he would return very shortly. Camilla was astonished by Anselmo's reply, which left her more perplexed than she had been earlier. She did not dare either to remain in her house or to go to the house of her parents. If she remained, her virtue would be at risk, and if she left, she would be disobeying her husband. In short, she made a choice, and chose badly, for she resolved to remain, determined not to flee Lothario's presence and give the servants reason to gossip. She regretted having written what she wrote to her husband, fearful he would think that Lothario had seen some boldness in her that moved him to treat her with less than proper decorum. But, confident of her virtue, she put her trust in God and in her own innocence, and planned to resist with silence everything Lothario had said to her, not informing her husband in order to spare him disputes or difficulties. She even tried to think of a way to excuse Lothario to Anselmo when he asked her the reason for writing the letter. With these thoughts, more honorable than accurate or beneficial, she spent another day listening to Lothario, who was so persistent and persuasive that Camilla's resolve began to waver, and it was all her virtue could do to attend to her eyes and keep them from showing any sign of the amorous compassion awakened in her bosom by Lothario's tears and words. Lothario noted all of this, and it all set him ablaze. Finally, it seemed to him that it was necessary, in the time and circumstance allowed by Anselmo's absence, to tighten the siege around the fortress, and so he launched an attack on her conceit with praises of her beauty, because there is nothing more likely to defeat and bring down the haughty towers of beautiful women's vanity than that same vanity, set in words of adulation. In effect, with utmost diligence, he undermined the rock face of her integrity with such effective tools that even if Camilla had been made entirely of bronze, she would have fallen. Lothario wept, pleaded, offered, adored, persisted, and deceived with so much emotion and so many signs of sincerity that he brought down Camilla's chastity and won the victory he had least expected and most desired. Camilla surrendered. Camilla surrendered. But is there any wonder if the friendship of Lothario could not remain standing? A clear example demonstrating that the only way to defeat the amorous passion is to flee it, and no one should attempt to struggle against so powerful an enemy because divine forces are needed to vanquish its human ones. Only Leonela knew of her mistress's frailty, because the two unfaithful friends and new lovers could not hide it from her. Lothario did not want to tell Camilla of Anselmo's scheme, or that Anselmo had provided him with the opportunity to come so far. He did not want her to have a low opinion of his love, or to think he had courted her thoughtlessly and by chance, rather than intentionally. A few days later, Anselmo returned to his house and did not notice what was missing, the thing he had treated most contemptuously and valued most highly. He went to see Lothario immediately and found him at home. The two men embraced, and one asked for the news that would give him either life or death. "The news I can give you, Anselmo, my friend," said Lothario, "is that you have a wife worthy of being the model and paragon of all virtuous women. The words I said to her were carried away by the wind. My offers were scorned, my gifts were refused, and a few feigned tears of mine were mocked beyond measure. In short, just as Camilla is the sum total of all beauty, she is the treasure house where chastity dwells and discretion and modesty reside, along with all the virtues that make an honorable woman praiseworthy and fortunate. Here is your money, friend. Take it back, for I never had need of it. Camilla's integrity does not yield to things as low as presents or promises. Be content, Anselmo, and do not attempt more tests. Since you have passed through the sea of difficulties and suspicions that one often can have about women, and you have kept your feet dry, do not attempt to return to the deep waters of new dangers, or test, with another pilot, the virtue and strength of the ship that heaven has provided to carry you across the seas of this world. Realize, instead, that you are in a safe harbor. Drop the anchors of reason and stay in port until you are asked to pay the debt that no human, no matter how noble, can avoid paying." Anselmo was made very happy by Lothario's words, and he believed them as if they had been spoken by an oracle. Even so, he asked his friend not to abandon the undertaking, if only for the sake of curiosity and amusement, and even if he no longer brought to it the same zeal and urgency as before. He only wanted Lothario to write some verses in praise of Camilla, calling her Chloe, and Anselmo would tell her that Lothario was in love with a woman to whom he had given his name so that he could celebrate with her the decorum her modesty required. And if Lothario did not wish to take the trouble of writing the verses, Anselmo would do it. "That will not be necessary," said Lothario, "for the Muses are not so antagonistic to me that they do not visit me a few times a year. Tell me, Camilla, what you said about my fictitious love, and I shall compose the verses, and if they are not as good as the subject deserves, at least they will be the best I can write." The reckless man and his traitorous friend agreed to this, and when Anselmo returned to his house, he asked what, to Camilla's great surprise, he had not asked before, which was that she tell him the reason she had written him the letter. Camilla responded that it had seemed Lothario was looking at her somewhat more boldly than when Anselmo was at home, but she had been mistaken, and believed it had been her imagination, because now Lothario avoided seeing her and being alone with her. Anselmo said she could be sure of that, because he knew that Lothario was in love with a noble maiden in the city, whom he celebrated under the name of Clory. Even if he were not, there was no reason to doubt Lothario's truthfulness, or his great friendship for the two of them. If Lothario had not wanted Camilla, if Lothario had not warned Camilla that his love for Clory was all pretense, and that he had told Anselmo about it so that he could spend some time writing praises of Camilla herself, she undoubtedly would have been caught in the despair net of jealousy. But she had been forewarned, and this unexpected piece of news did not trouble her. The next day, when the three of them were sitting at the table after their meal, Anselmo asked Lothario to recite one of the pieces he had composed for his beloved Clory. Since Camilla did not know her, he surely could say whatever he wished. Even if she did know her, responded Lothario, I would not hide anything, because when a lover praises his lady's beauty and censures her cruelty, he in no way brings dishonor to her good name. But, be that as it may, I can say that yesterday I composed a sonnet to the ingratitude of Clory, and it says, in the deepest quietude of the night, when gentle sleeps embrace mortal men, I make this poor accounting of my wealth, of woes to heaven, and to Clory mine. And at the hour when the sun appears through rosy-colored portals of the east, with broken-hearted sighs and halting words, I endlessly renew the old lament. And when the sun, from his celestial throne, hurls burning rays directly down to earth, my tears flow free, and my sobs do increase. Bambeezle, thank you so much for the follow. The night returns. I turn to my sad tale, and once more find, in wearisome complaint, that heaven is death, and Clory cannot hear. Camilla liked the sonnet, but Anselmo liked it even more, for he praised it, and said that a lady who did not respond to such evident truth was too cruel, to which Camilla said, then everything said by enamored poets is true? Insofar as they are poets, no, responded Lothario, but insofar as they are enamored, they are always as lost for words as they are truthful. There is no doubt about that, replied Anselmo, simply to support and confirm Lothario's opinions before Camilla, who was unaware of Anselmo's stratagem and already in love with Lothario. And so, with the pleasure she derived from everything relating to him, and with the understanding that his desires and his writings were directed to her, and that she was the real Clory, she asked him to recite another sonnet, and more verses, if he knew them by heart. I do, responded Lothario, but I do not believe it is as good as, it is less bad than the first. But judge for yourself, because it says, I know I die, and if my words is doubted, my death's more certain, my body lying dead at your feet, O cruel beauty, is more certain than my repenting of my love for you. When I am in the land of the forgotten, deserted by glory, favor, and by life, there, in my open bosom you will see a sculpted image of your lovely face. I keep his holy relic for the looming rigors brought on and caused by my persistence, made stronger by the harshness of your will. Oh, woe to him who sails 'neath darkened skies, across uncharted seas and dangerous routes, where neither port nor polestar lights the way. Anselmo praised this second sonnet as he had the first, and in this fashion he was adding link by link to the chain that bound and fastened him to his dishonor. For the more Lothario dishonored him, the more honored he said Anselmo was, and every step Camilla took in her descent to the very center of disgrace was, in the opinion of her husband, an ascent to the pinnacle of her virtue and good name. It happened that once, when Camilla found herself alone with her maid, she said, "I am mortified, my dear Leonela, to see how lightly I value myself, for I did not even oblige Lothario to pay with time for the complete possession of my desire. I gave it to him so quickly. I fear he will judge only my haste or indiscretion, not taking into account that he urged me so strongly I could no longer resist him." "Do not be concerned, Signora," responded Leonela. "Giving quickly is of little significance, and no reason to lessen esteem, if, in fact, what one gives is good and in itself worthy of esteem. They even say that by giving quickly, one gives twice." "They also say," said Camilla, "that what costs less is valued less." "The argument doesn't apply to you," responded Leonela, "because love, I've heard it said, sometimes flies and sometimes walks. It runs with one and goes slowly with another. It cools some and burns others. Some it wounds and others it kills. It begins the rush of its desires at one point, and at the same point it ends and concludes them. In the morning it lays siege to a fortress, and by nightfall it has broken through, because there is no power that can resist it. And this being true, why are you concerned? And what do you fear if the same thing must have happened to Lothario? For love used the absence of my master as the instrument for overcoming us." And there is a note, and it says, "As Martine de Ricoeur points out, Leonela says us because she was complicit in the affair." It was inevitable that what love had planned would be concluded before Anselmo could return and prevent the design's completion by his presence, because love has no better minister for carrying out his desires than opportunity. He makes use of opportunity in everything he does, especially in the beginning. I know this very well, more from experience than from hearsay, and one day I'll tell you about it, Signora, for I am also young and made of flesh and blood. Besides, Signora Camilla, you would not have given yourself or surrendered so quickly if you had not first seen in Lothario's eyes words, sighs, promises, and gifts all his soul, or not seen in it and its virtues how worthy Lothario was of being loved. If this is true, do not allow those qualms and second thoughts to assault your imagination, but be assured that Lothario esteems you as you esteem him, and live contented and satisfied that although you are caught in the snare of love, it is he who tightens it around you with his admiration and esteem. He not only has the 4 S's that people say good lovers need to have, but a whole alphabet as well. If you don't believe me, just listen and you'll see how I can recite it to you by heart. And there's a note after 4 S's, and it says, the 4 S's that a lover needed to be were sabio, wise, solo, alone, solicito, solicitous, and secreto, secretive. This conceit was popular during the Renaissance, as were the ABCs of love cited by many authors. The W is omitted from Leonela's ABC, because it is not part of the Spanish alphabet, which is about to happen, if that comment makes no sense. If only they had known this part would eventually be read aloud at every wedding ever. If only. He is, as I see it, and in my opinion, here we go, here comes the alphabet. Amiable, benevolent, courteous, dignified, enamored, firm, gallant, honorable, illustrious, loyal, manly, noble, open-hearted, pleasing, quick-witted, rich, the S's that everybody knows, and then truthful, valiant. X isn't included because it's a harsh letter. Y is the same as I, and Z is zealous in protecting your honor. Camilla laughed at her maid's alphabet and considered her more experienced in matters of love than she said. In fact, she confessed to this, revealing to Camilla her love for a well-born young man from their city. This troubled Camilla, for she feared that here was where her honor could be endangered. She pressed Leonela to find out if their love had gone beyond words. With little shame and a good deal of audacity, she responded that it had. For it is certainly true that negligence in ladies destroys shame in their maids. When they see their mistresses stumble, they do not care if they stumble too, or if anyone knows about it. All that Camilla could do was to implore Leonela not to say anything about her mistress's affair to the man she said was her lover, and to keep her own secret, so that it would not come to the attention of either Anselmo or Lothario. Leonela responded that she would, but she kept her word in a way that affirmed Camilla's fear that she would lose her reputation because of her maid, for the immodest and brazen Leonela, when she saw that her mistress's behavior was not what it had once been, dared to bring her lover into the house and keep him there, confident that even if Camilla saw him, she would not venture to reveal it. This is one of the many misfortunes caused by the sins of ladies. They become the slaves of their own servants, and are obliged to conceal their maids' immodest and base behavior, which is what happened to Camilla. Although she often saw Leonela with her lover in one of the rooms of her house, she not only did not dare to reprimand her, but provided Leonela with the opportunity to hide him, clearing away every obstacle so that he would not be seen by her husband. But she could not keep Lothario from seeing him one day as he left the house at dawn. Lothario did not know who he was, and at first thought it was a ghost. But when he saw him walk, and muffle his face, and conceal himself with care and caution, he abandoned his simple idea and took up another that would have meant the ruin of them all if Camilla had not rectified it. Lothario thought that the man he had seen leaving Anselmo's house at so unusual an hour had not gone there because of Leonela. He did not even remember that there was a Leonela in the world. He believed only that Camilla, who had been easy and loose with him, was being just as easy and loose with another man. For the immortality of the immoral woman brings with it this effect. She loses her good name and honor with the very man to whose entreaties and enticements she succumbed. He believes she surrendered more easily to other men, and takes as absolute truth any suspicion of the kind that may occur to him. It certainly seems that at this point Lothario lost his good sense, and forgot all his skillful reasoning. Without a second or even a rational thought, filled with impatience and blinded by the jealous rage gnawing at his entrails and driving him to take his revenge on Camilla, who in no way had offended him, he went to see Anselmo, who was still in bed, and said, "You should know, Anselmo, that for many days I have been struggling with myself, forcing myself not to tell you what it is no longer possible or fair to keep from you. You should know that the fortress of Camilla has surrendered and submitted to everything I wished, and if I have delayed in disclosing this to you, it was to see if it was a passing whim, or if she was testing me to see if I was serious about the love I had, with your permission, begun to declare for her. I also believed that if she was as virtuous as she should have been, and as we both thought she was, she would already have told you about my solicitations. Seeing that she has not, I realize that the promises she has made to me are true, and that the next time you are absent from your house, she will speak to me in the antechamber where you keep your jewels and treasure." It was true that Camilla usually spoke to him there. But I do not want you to rush off to take your revenge, because the sin has not yet been committed except in thought, and it may be that when the time comes to turn the thought into action, Camilla will have changed her mind and replaced the thought with repentance. Therefore, since you have always followed my advice, completely or in part, take the counsel I will give you now, so that prudently forewarned, and with no chance of being deceived, you may be satisfied regarding the best course of action to follow. Pretend that you are leaving for 2 or 3 days, as you have in the past, but stay hidden in your antechamber, where there are tapestries and other things that can conceal you very comfortably. Then you will see with your own eyes, and I with mine, exactly what Camilla wants. And if it is the immortality that may be feared, but is not expected, then silently, wisely, and discreetly you can punish the offense committed against you. Anselmo was bewildered, perplexed, and astonished by Lothario's words, for they came at the moment when he least expected to hear them. He now considered Camilla to be victorious over the feigned assaults of Lothario, and he was beginning to enjoy the glory of her triumph. He said nothing for a long time, staring at the floor, not blinking an eye. And then, at last, he spoke, saying, "You have done, Lothario, what I expected of your friendship. I shall follow your advice in everything, arrange matters as you wish, and keep the secret as it should be kept in so unexpected a circumstance." Lothario promised he would, and as he left the room he repented completely for everything he had said, and he saw how foolishly he had behaved, since he could take his own revenge on Camilla, and not in so cruel and dishonorable a way. He cursed his lack of intelligence, denounced his hasty decision, and did not know by what means he could undo what he had done, or give it a more reasonable outcome. Finally, he decided to tell Camilla everything, and since there is no lack of opportunity, he found her alone the same day. And as soon as she saw that she could speak freely, she said to him, "You should know, friend Lothario, that my heart aches so much it seems it is about to break inside my bosom, and it will be a miracle if it does not, for Leonella's shamelessness has grown so great that she brings her lover into this house every night, and is with him until daybreak, putting my reputation at the greatest risk if anyone were to see him leaving my house at that hour. What troubles me is that I cannot punish or reprimand her. She is privy to our affair, and that has curbed my speech and forced me to be silent about hers, and I am afraid this will give rise to some misfortunes." The tangled web we weave. When Camilla first began to speak, Lothario believed it was a ruse to convince him that the man she had seen was Leonella's lover, not hers. But when he saw her weep and grieve and ask for his help, he believed the truth, and then felt completely bewildered and remorseful. Despite this, however, he told Camilla not to worry, saying he would devise a plan to put an end to Leonella's insolence. He also told her what, in his jealous rage, he had said to Anselmo, and how it had been agreed that Anselmo would hide in the antechamber and see her lack of fidelity for himself. He begged her forgiveness for this act of madness, and asked her advice on how to repair the damage he had done, and emerge safely from the intricate labyrinth into which his foolish talk had led them. Camilla was horrified to hear what Lothario was saying, and with a good deal of anger and many well-chosen words, she reproached him, denouncing his wicked thoughts and the simple-minded and wrong-headed decision he had made. But since a woman naturally has a quicker wit for both good and evil than a man, though it tends to fail her when she embarks on any kind of deliberate reasoning, Camilla soon found a way to repair the apparently irreparable situation, and she told Lothario to have Anselmo hide the next day in the place he had mentioned, because for his concealment she intended to derive an advantage that would allow the two of them to take their pleasure from then on with no fear of being surprised. Not telling him all of her idea, she warned Lothario to be sure, when Anselmo was hidden, to come in as soon as Leonela called him, and responded to everything she said as he would if he did not know Anselmo was listening. Lothario insisted she tell him her plan, so that he would do everything he needed to do with the greater certainty and care. "I tell you," said Camilla, "that there is nothing for you to do except answer the questions I ask." Camilla did not want to tell him beforehand that what she planned to do, fearful he would not go along with what she thought was a very good plan, but instead would follow or look for others that could not possibly be as good. At this, Lothario left the house. The next day, using the excuse that he was going to the village where his friend lived, Anselmo went away and then came back to hide, which he did with no trouble since Camilla and Leonela had arranged to give him the opportunity. And so Anselmo hid, feeling, as one can imagine, the agitation of a man who expected to see with his own eyes the very heart of his honor exposed, and to lose the supreme treasure he had thought he possessed in his beloved Camilla. When Camilla and Leonela were absolutely sure and certain that Anselmo was hiding, they walked into the antechamber, and as soon as Camilla stepped in, she heaved a great sigh and said, "Oh, Leonela, my friend, before I carry out my plan, which I do not want you to know about in the event you attempt to prevent it, would it not be better for you to take Anselmo's dagger, the one I asked you to bring, and with it pierce this ignoble bosom of mine? But no, do not. It would not be reasonable for me to bear responsibility for another's crime. First, I want to know what the bold and immoral eyes of Lothario saw in me that gave him the audacity to reveal a desire as wicked as the one he has revealed to me, one that shows disdain for his friend and dishonors me. Go, Leonela, to that window and call him. Undoubtedly he is in the street, waiting to put his evil intention into effect. But first, I shall carry out mine, as cruel as it is honorable." "Oh, Signora," responded the clever and forewarned Leonela, "what is it that you want to do with this dagger? Do you by chance wish to take your own life, or that of Lothario? Either action will discredit your name and reputation. It is better for you to hide the offense. Do not give that wicked man the opportunity to enter this house and find us alone. Think, Signora, we are women, and weak, and he is a man, and determined. Since he comes with his wicked intention, blind with passion, perhaps, before you can put your palm into effect, he'll do the thing that would be worse than taking your life. Confound Signor Anselmo for allowing that insolent knave to do so much evil in this house. And if, Signora, you kill him, as I think you intend to do, what will we do with him when he's dead?" "What will we do, my friend?" responded Camilla. "We will leave him for Anselmo to bury, for he will rightly consider it a restful task to put his own infamy under the ground. Call Lothario once and for all. The more I delay taking my legitimate revenge for the offense, the more I seem to offend the loyalty I owe my husband." Anselmo listened to all of this, and each word Camilla said changed his thoughts. But when he realized that she had determined to kill Lothario, he wanted to come out and show himself, and prevent her from doing that. He was held back, however, by his desire to see the outcome of so gallant and virtuous a resolve, although he intended to come out in time to stop it. Just then Camilla fell into a deep swoon, and laying her down on a bed that was in the chamber, Leonela began to cry very bitterly, saying, "Ah, woe is me if I am so unfortunate that she dies here in my arms, the flower of the world's modesty, the crown of virtuous women, the exemplar of all chastity." She said other things similar to these, and no one who heard her would have taken her for the most aggrieved and loyal maid in the world, and her mistress for a second persecuted Penelope. Camilla soon recovered from her swoon, and when she did, she said, "Why do you not go, Leonela, and call the most loyal friend ever seen by the sun or hidden by night? Go, run, hurry, make haste. Do not allow delay to cool the flames of rage that I feel, or the righteous vengeance I hope for to dwindle into mere threats and curses. "I am going now to call him, Signora," said Leonela, "but first you must give me the dagger, so that while I am gone you do not do something that will leave all those who love you weeping for the rest of their lives." "You may go, Leonela, my friend, certain that I shall not," responded Camilla, "because although in your opinion it is rash and foolish of me to defend my honor, I shall not go as far as that Lucretia, who, they say, killed herself, even though she had done no wrong, and without first killing the one responsible for her misfortune. I shall die, if I must, but I have to take my revenge and exact satisfaction from the man who has brought me to this place to weep over the insolence of his actions, for which I am blameless." Leonela had to be asked many more times before she went out to call Lothario, but finally she left, and while she was gone, Camilla said, as if talking to herself, "Lord save me, would it not have been better to reject Lothario, as I have so many times before, rather than give him reason to think, as I have done now, that I am immodest and unchaste, even for this short time that I must wait until I make him aware of his error? No doubt it would have been better, but then I would not be avenged, nor my husband's honor satisfied if, with clean hands, he could walk away so easily from the situation to which his wicked thoughts have brought him. Let the traitor pay with his life for what his lascivious desire attempted to do. Let the world know, if it ever does come to light, that Camilla not only remained faithful to her husband, but took revenge on the one who dared offend him. Even so, I believe it would have been better to tell Anselmo, but I tried in the letter I wrote to him when he was in the village, and I think this not coming to remedy the harm I pointed out to him must have been because he is so good and trusting. He would not or could not believe that the bosom of so firm a friend could harbor any thoughts detrimental to his honor. Not even I believed it afterward, not for many days, and I never would have believed it if his insolence had not grown so great, and if his open offers of gifts and exaggerated promises and constant tears had not made it clear to me. But why do I even think about this now? Does a gallant resolve have need of more counsel? Of course not. Away, traitors, come revenge. Let the deceiver enter. Let him come. Let him arrive. Let him die and be finished with. Let whatever happen, happen. I was pure when I came into possession of the man heaven gave me for my own. I shall be pure when I leave it behind, even if I am bathed in my own chaste blood and the impure blood of the falsest friend that friendship has ever known." And saying this, she paced the room with the dagger unsheathed, making such disordered and extravagant movements and gestures that she appeared to have lost her mind, and seemed not a fragile woman, but a desperate ruffian. Anselmo watched it all, concealed behind the tapestries where he had hidden. He was astonished by everything, and it seemed to him that what he had seen and heard was enough to allay the greatest suspicions, and he would have liked to forego the proofs that would have come with Lothario's arrival, fearing some dreadful mishap. He was about to show himself and come out of hiding to embrace and reassure his wife, but he stopped when he saw Leonela return, leading Lothario by the hand, and as soon as Camilla saw him, he drew a line on the floor with the dagger and said, "Lothario, listen to what I am saying. If by some chance you dare to cross this line, or even approach it, at the very moment I see what you are attempting, I shall plunge the dagger I am holding into my breast. And before you say a word in response, I want you to listen to a few more of mine, and then you can say whatever you wish. First, I want you to tell me, Lothario, if you know my husband Anselmo, and what opinion you have of him. Second, I also want to know if you know me. Answer me this, and do not be confused or think too much about how you will reply, for my questions are not difficult." Lothario was not so simple-minded that he had not realized what Camilla intended from the moment she told him to have Anselmo hide, and he responded so cleverly and so appropriately to her intention that the two of them made the lie appear to be the absolute truth. And so he replied to Camilla in this fashion: I did not think, O beautiful Camilla, that you called me in order to ask me things so far from the intention from which I come here. If you are doing this in order to delay granting me the promised favor, you should have done so from a greater distance, for the nearer we are to the object of our desire, the greater our hope of possessing it. But, so that you cannot say I do not answer your questions, I will say that I know your husband Anselmo, and he and I have known each other since we were children. I do not want to say what you know all too well about our friendship, so that I do not bear witness to the offense that love, which is a powerful excuse for even greater crimes, forces me to commit against him. I know you and hold you in the same high esteem that he does. Otherwise I do not, for any lesser prize, violate what I owe my own person, and the holy laws of true friendship infringed and broken by me on account of an enemy as powerful as love. Atkinson! Hello, welcome in. Oh man, throwing in a book recommendation? And it's by our very own Atkinson? Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for the recommendation. That's great. It's totally fine. It is absolutely shameless, and I'm fine with it. If you confess to that, responded Camilla, mortal enemy of all that justly deserves to be loved, how do you dare appear before the one who, as you know, is the mirror that reflects him? If you looked in it carefully, you would see how little justification you have for offending him. But oh, woe is me. Now I realize what has made you disregard what you owe to yourself. It must have been negligence on my part. I do not wish to call it immodesty, since it did not follow from a deliberate decision, but from the sort of careless act that women often commit inadvertently when they think they have no reason to be cautious. Otherwise, tell me, O traitor, when did I ever respond to your entreaties with a word or gesture that would have awakened in you even the shadow of a hope of satisfying your base desires? When were your amorous words not rejected and reproached with severity and harshness? When were your many promises and gifts ever believed or accepted? But since it seems to me that no one can persevere in his amorous intention for very long if he is not sustained by some hope, I shall blame myself for your impertinence, for no doubt some negligence on my part has sustained your desire for so long, and therefore I shall impose the punishment and penalty on myself that your crime deserves, and so that you may see that if I am cruel with myself, I could be no less cruel with you. I wanted to bring you here to be a witness to the sacrifice I intend to make to the insulted honor of my honorable husband. You offended him with all possible deliberation, as I offended him by my carelessness in giving you the opportunity, if in fact I gave you one, that would favor and condone your wicked intentions. I say again, the suspicion I have that some carelessness of mine engendered those monstrous thoughts in you troubles me greatly. It is what I desire to punish with my own hands, for if another punished me, perhaps my crime would be made public. But before I do that, I want to kill as I die, and take with me the one who will finally satisfy my desire for the vengeance I hope for, and that I shall have when I see, in the next world, the penalty imposed by a disinterested justice that does not bend before the one who has brought me to such desperate straits. Thank you for contributing to Sunday's stream. And having said this, With incredible strength and speed, she attacked Lothario with the unsheathed dagger, showing such clear intentions of wanting to plunge it into his bosom that he was not certain if her displays were false or true, for he had to use his skill and strength to keep Camilla from stabbing him. She was acting out that strange deception and lie so vividly that in order to give it the appearance of truth, she tried to color it with her own blood. Seeing that she could not reach Lothario, or pretending that she could not, she said, "Fate does not wish to satisfy completely my righteous desire, but it will not be strong enough to keep me from satisfying it, in part at least." And struggling to free from Lothario's grasp the hand that held the dagger, she finally succeeded, aimed the point at a part of her body that she could wound, but not deeply, and plunged it in above her left armpit, near the shoulder. Then she dropped to the floor as if she had fallen into a faint. Leonela and Lothario were dumbfounded, astonished at what had just happened, and still doubting its reality, although Camilla lay on the floor, bathed in blood. Lothario, horrified and breathless, rushed over to her to pull out the dagger, and when he saw how small the wound was, he stopped being afraid, and once again marveled at the great sagacity, prudence, and intelligence of the beautiful Camilla. In order to comply with his obligations, he began a long, melancholy lamentation over Camilla's body, as if she were dead, and he cursed not only himself, but the man who had placed her in that situation. And since he knew that his friend Anselmo was listening, he said things that would move anyone to pity him much more than Camilla, even if he did think she was dead. Leonela took her in her arms and laid her on the bed, pleading with Lothario to go and find someone who would heal Camilla in secret. She also asked his advice and opinion regarding what they would tell Anselmo about her mistress's wound in the event he came home before she was healed. He replied that they would say whatever they wanted, for he was not the one to give any useful advice. He would say only that she should try to stop the bleeding, because he was going where no one would see him again. Displaying great grief and emotion, he left the house, and when he found himself alone, in a place where no one could see him, he could not stop crossing himself as he marveled at Camilla's stratagem and Leonela's clever responses. He considered how certain Anselmo would be that his wife was a second Portia, and he wished he could meet with him so they could both celebrate the most hidden truth and concealed lie that anyone could ever imagine. Leonela staunched her mistress's blood, which was no more than what was necessary to make the lie believable, and washing the wound with a little wine, she bandaged it the best she could, and as she treated her, she said words that would have been enough, even if nothing had been said before, to persuade Anselmo that he had in Camilla the very image and example of virtue. Added to Leonela's words were those of Camilla, who called herself a craven coward for not having the courage, when she needed it most, to take her own life, which she despised. She asked her maid if she should tell her dear husband about what had happened. Leonela advised her not to, because that would oblige him to take his revenge on Lothario, which would be dangerous, and it was the duty of a good wife not to give her husband reasons for dispute, but to save him from as many as possible. Camilla responded that her advice seemed very good, and she would follow it. But in any case they ought to decide what they would tell Anselmo about the reason for the wound, which he would be bound to see, to which Leonela replied that she did not know how to lie, even as a joke. "Well, my friend," replied Camilla, "then what shall I do if I would not dare create or sustain a lie, even if my life depended on it? If we cannot find our way out of this, it would be better to tell him the unadorned truth, rather than have him discover us in a falsehood." "Don't be sad, Signora, by tomorrow," responded Leonela. "I'll think of what we should say. And perhaps because of where the wound is, you'll be able to hide it, and he won't see it, and heaven will be merciful and favor our just and honorable thoughts. Be calm, Señora, and try to stay calm, so that my master doesn't find you troubled, and you can leave the rest to me and to God, who always comes to the aid of virtuous desires." Anselmo had been very attentive as he heard and watched the performance of the tragedy of the death of his honor, which had been performed with such unusual and convincing effects by the actors that they seemed to have been transformed into the very parts they were playing. He longed for night to fall, when he would be able to leave his house and go to see his good friend Lothario and celebrate him, the precious pearl he had discovered in the revelation of his wife's virtue. The two women were careful to give him the opportunity to leave, and he did not miss that opportunity. And he left, and went to find Lothario. And when he had found him, it was difficult to recount the number of embraces he gave him, the things he said about his joy, his praises of Camilla. Lothario listened to all of this, and could give no indications of happiness, because he thought of how deceived his friend was, and how unjustly he had wronged him. And although Anselmo saw that Lothario was not happy, he thought it was because he had left Camilla wounded, when he had been the reason for the wound. Among other things, he even told him not to grieve over what had happened to Camilla, because the wound was surely superficial, since the two women had agreed to hide it from him. Therefore there was nothing to fear. And from now on Lothario should rejoice and celebrate with him, because through his efforts Anselmo found himself lifted to the highest happiness he could ever desire. And he wanted to do nothing else but write verses in praise of Camilla that would make her live forever in the memory of future ages. Lothario praised his decision and said that he, for his part, would help him raise so noble an edifice. And so Anselmo was the most deliciously deceived man in the world. He himself led into his house the man who was the ruination of his name, believing he had been the instrument of his glory. Camilla received him with an apparently crestfallen expression, although her soul rejoiced. This deception lasted some months, until fortune spun her wheel. The wickedness they had concealed with so much skill was made public, and Anselmo's reckless curiosity cost him his life. End of chapter 34. All right, so they're continuing to read this story that they found in the inn between Anselmo, Lothario, and Anselmo's wife, Camilla. And basically, Anselmo convinces Lothario to woo his own wife, and Lothario doesn't for a very long time, and Anselmo finds out, and he's like, dude, just do it. And so Anselmo leaves for like a long extended period of time. I think it's like a week or something, and Lothario actually does fall in love with Camilla, and Camilla sort of does like the attention from Lothario. And when Anselmo comes back, Lothario has removed himself, saying that, he's in love with somebody else, but not really. It's actually still Camilla, and has written a bunch of poetry, like longing poetry. And Lothario he just can't take it anymore. So he sees somebody leaving Camilla's house very early in the morning, and is just convinced that Camilla has now taken other suitors, that Lothario has weakened her virtue, and now she's taking other suitors, when in fact, the maid, Leonella, is taking suitors. And so, with this misgiving, Lothario goes and tells Anselmo, dude, this is what's happening. Like, I think Camilla is actually falling in love with me, blah, blah, blah. So Camilla comes up with this ruse that we just read about, where Anselmo is hiding, and she like stabs herself to keep her virtues because she would rather be wounded or be made clean in her death than continue the relationship between her and Lothario. But it's all for Anselmo's benefit because he's watching all of it. And this story may or may not have anything to do with Don Quixote himself and his storyline. They're just in an inn right now. Don Quixote is actually sleeping, and everybody in the inn is listening to this novel being read aloud, and it is a novel that was left by somebody passing through in the inn. So, here we are. Oh man, I almost made a big mess. Okay, chapter 35, in which the novel of The Curious Man Who Was Reckless, excuse me, that is not what it was called, in which the novel of The Man Who Was Recklessly Curious is concluded. The Man Who Was Recklessly Curious is the name of the novel that they are reading in the inn. So this novel is taking 3 chapters out of this story. Only a little more of the novel remained to be read when a distraught Sancho Panza rushed out of the garret where Don Quixote slept, shouting, "Come, señores, come quickly and help my master, who's involved in the fiercest, most awful battle my eyes have ever seen. By God, what a thrust he gave to the giant, the enemy of the Señora, Princess, Micomicona." That is not really her name. It's her fake name that she gave to Don Quixote. Let me start that sentence over. By God, what a thrust he gave to the giant, the enemy of the Señora Princess Micomicona, when he cut his head right off, just like a turnip. "What are you saying, brother?" said the priest, who had stopped reading the novel. "Are you in your right mind, Sancho? How the devil can what you say be true if the giant is 2,000 leagues from here?" Just then he heard a loud noise in the garret, and the sound of Don Quixote shouting, "Hold, thief! Scoundrel! Coward! I have you now, and your scimitar will be of little use to you." And he seemed to be slashing at the walls with his sword. Sancho said, "Don't stand and listen. Go in and stop the fight, or help my master. Though that won't be necessary, because, no doubt about it, the giant must be dead by now and giving an accounting to God of his sinful life. I saw his blood running over the floor, and his head cut off and fallen to one side, a head the size of a big wineskin." "Strike me dead," said the innkeeper, "if Don Quixote, or Don Devil, hasn't slashed one of the skins of red wine hanging on the head of his bed. The spilled wine must be what this good man thinks is blood." And then he hurried into the room, and all the rest followed him, and they discovered Don Quixote in the strangest outfit in the world. He was in his shirt, which was not long enough in the front to cover his thighs completely, and in the back was shorter by a span of 6 fingers. His legs were very long and thin and hairy and not particularly clean. On his head he wore a red, greasy nightcap that belonged to the innkeeper. Wrapped around his left arm was the blanket from the bed, toward which Sancho Panza felt some animosity, for reasons he knew only too well. In his right hand he held his unsheathed sword, and was slashing with it in all directions and shouting as if he really were fighting a giant. Best of all, his eyes were not open because he was sleeping and dreaming that he was doing battle with the giant, for his imagination of the adventure he was about to undertake was so intense that it made him dream he had already come to the kingdom of Micomicon, and was already engaged in battle with his enemy. He had slashed the wineskin so many times with his sword, thinking he was slashing the giant, that the entire room was covered in wine. When he saw this, the innkeeper became so enraged that he threw himself on Don Quixote and began to give him so many blows that it is with his fists that if Cardenio and the priest had not pulled him off, he alone would have ended the conflict with the giant. With it all, the poor knight did not awaken until the barber brought a large pot of cold water from the well and threw it at him all at once, which roused Don Quixote, but not enough for him to realize what he was doing. Dorothea, who saw how scantily and tenuously he was dressed, did not wish to come in and watch the combat between her defender and her adversary. Sancho looked everywhere on the floor for the giant's head, and when he did not find it, he said, "Now I know that everything in this house is enchantment. The last time I stood on this very spot where I am standing, I was punched and beaten, and I never knew who was doing it, and I never could see anybody, and now the head is nowhere to be found, though I saw it cut off with my very own eyes, and the blood ran out of the body like water from a fountain." "What blood and what fountain are you talking about, you enemy of God and all his saints?" said the innkeeper. "Don't you see, you thief, that the blood and the fountain are only these slashed wineskins and the red wine flowing this room? I'd like to see the soul of whoever slashed them drowning in the floods of hell." "All I know," responded Sancho, "is that if I don't find that head, my luck will turn, and my countship will dissolve away like salt in water." Sancho awake was worse than his master asleep. Such was the faith he had in the promises his master had made to him. The innkeeper despaired when he saw the slow wits of the squire and the damage done by his master, and he swore it would not be like the last time, when they left without paying. This time they would not claim the privileges of chivalry to keep from paying for both stays at the inn, including the cost of the patches he would have to put on the torn wineskins. The priest was holding Don Quixote by the hands, and the knight, believing the adventure had been concluded, and that he was before the Princess Mocomocona, kneeled in front of the princess, saying, "Now, your highness, your noble and illustrious ladyship, may live in the certainty that from this day forth this low-born creature can do you no harm, and I, from this day forth, am released from the promise I made to you, for with the help of God on high, and the favour of her for whom I live and breathe, I have kept the promise, and with great success." "Didn't I tell you?" said Sancho when he heard this. "I told you I wasn't drunk. Now you can see if my master hasn't slaughtered and salted that giant. Now it's for sure. My countship's on the way." And there is a note after "now it's for sure," and it says, "The phrase in Spanish, ciertos son los toros, is equivalent to the bulls are certain. That is, there is no doubt about the outcome." I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really appreciate the footnotes that talk about the nuances and intricacies of the translation, because some of it just doesn't translate into English. So that's really nice to have that added context. I really appreciate that. And it's just a layer, a new way to nerd out. Language is just so cool. Who would not have laughed at the foolishness of both master and servant? Everyone did except the innkeeper, who cursed his luck. But at the last, with no small effort, the barber, Cardenio, and the priest returned Don Quixote to the bed where he fell asleep, showing signs of great weariness. They left him sleeping and went out to the entrance to the inn to console Sancho Panza for not having found the giant's head, though it was more difficult for them to placate the innkeeper, who was in despair at the sudden demise of his wineskins, and the innkeeper's wife said, with great cries and shouts, It was an evil moment and a cursed hour when this knight-errant came into my house. He cost me so much. I wish I'd never laid eyes on him. The last time he left without paying the cost of a night, a meal, a bed, straw, and barley, for him and his squire, and a horse and a donkey, saying that he was an adventuring knight. May God give him unlucky adventures, him and all the adventures in the world, and that's why he wasn't obliged to pay anything, according to the tariff regulations of errant knighthood. Then, on his account, this other gentleman comes along and takes away my oxtail and gives it back with more than 2 quartillos worth of damage, with not a hair on it, so it's no good for the thing my husband wanted it for. And there is a note after quartillos, and it says a quartillo is 1/4 of a real. And then, the finishing touch, he slashes my wineskins and spills my wine, and I only wish it was his blood that was spilled. Well, he won't get away with it, by the bones of my father and my mother's old white head. He'll pay me every quarto he owes, or my name isn't what it is, and I'm not my parents' daughter. And there is a note after quarto, and it says a quarto, a coin of very little value, was worth 4 maravedis, in case you're keeping track of the currency. These words, and others like them, were said in great anger by the innkeeper's wife, and her good maid, Maritornes, assisted her in this. Her daughter said nothing, and from time to time she smiled. The priest restored calm by promising to do everything in his power to compensate them for their loss. The wineskin as well as the wine, and in particular the damage to the oxtail, which they valued so highly. Dorothea consoled Sancho Panza, promising him that as soon as it was certain his master had cut off the giant's head, and she was peacefully ruling her kingdom again, she would give him the best countship in all the land. Sancho was comforted by this, and he assured the princess that could be certain he had seen the head of the giant, who seemed to have a beard that came down to his waist, and if the head could not be found, it was because everything that happened in that house was enchantment, as he had learned the last time he stayed here. Dorothea said she believed him, and he should not worry. Everything would be fine and turn out just as he wished. When everyone was calm, the priest wanted to finish reading the novel, because he said that he had almost reached the end. Cardenio, Dorothea, and all the others asked him to finish it, and the priest, who wished to satisfy everyone and wanted to read it as well, continued the story. Okay, so in between the story, that was just like a reminder to be like, hey, remember, the story isn't about this novel, it's about Don Quixote, and he's doing wild and crazy things. Let's just be reminded of how wild and crazy he is, and also Sancho Panza needs to have his countship. Now, let's get back to the novel. And so, because of Anselmo's uncertainty regarding Camilla's virtue, he led a carefree and contented life, and Camilla intentionally, excuse me, let me have a sip really quick. There we go. And Camilla intentionally showed coldness to Lothario, so that Anselmo would believe her feelings toward him were the opposite of what they truly were. To give this even more weight, Lothario asked permission not to visit his friend's house anymore, since it was clear that the sight of him troubled Camilla a great deal. But the deluded Anselmo said that under no circumstances would he allow any such thing. In this way, in 1,000 ways, Anselmo constructed his own dishonor, believing that he was creating his own delight. In the meantime, the delight Leonella, I said her name a million times before. I don't know why that time made me struggle. In the meantime, the delight Leonella took in freely engaging in her love affair went so far that she cared about nothing else and pursued it without restraint. certain that her mistress would conceal what she did and even advise her how to carry on an affair without arousing too much suspicion. Finally, one night, Anselmo heard footsteps in Leonella's bedroom, and when he tried to go in to see whose they were, he found the door close against him, which gave him an even greater desire to open it. He pushed so hard that it opened, and as he went in he saw a man leaping out the window to the street, and when he tried to hurry out to catch him or see who it was, he could do neither, because Leonela threw her arms around him, saying, "Be calm, señor. Don't be angry. You don't need to follow the man who left here. It really is my affair. In fact, he's my husband." Anselmo did not believe her. Instead, blind with rage. Trouter, thank you so much for the follow. Anselmo did not believe her. Instead, blind with rage, he took out his dagger and tried to stab Leonela, saying that if she did not tell him the truth, he would kill her. She was terrified, and not knowing what she was saying, she cried, "Don't kill me, señor, and I'll tell you things that are more important than you can imagine." "Tell me now," said Anselmo, "or you're a dead woman." "I can't now," said Leonela. "I'm too upset. Wait until tomorrow, and then you'll hear things that will amaze you. But you can be sure that the man who jumped out the window is a young man of this city who has given his promise to marry me." Anselmo grew calmer, and was willing to wait the period of time she requested, for he did not think he could hear anything against Camilla. He was so certain and sure of her virtue. So he went out of Leonella's bedroom and left her locked inside, saying she would not leave until she told him what she had to tell him. Then he went to see Camilla and told her everything that had occurred, and said that her maid had promised to tell him great, important things. It goes without saying that Camilla became alarmed, fearing, and with reason, that Leonela would tell Anselmo everything she knew about her infidelity. She did not have the courage to wait and see if her suspicions were true, and that same night, when she thought Anselmo was asleep, she gathered together the most precious jewels she had and some money, and without being detected by anyone, she left her house and went to Lothario's. She told him what had happened, and asked that he hide her, or that the two of them go where they would both be safe from Anselmo. Camilla threw Lothario into such confusion that he could not say a word, much less decide what to do. Finally, he decided to take Camilla to a convent where one of his sisters was prioress. Camilla agreed, and with the speed the situation demanded, Lothario took her to the convent and left her there, and he himself abandoned the city and told no one of his departure. At dawn, Anselmo's desire to hear what Leonela wanted to tell him was so great, he did not even notice that Camilla was not at his side, but got up and went to the room where he had left the maid. He unlocked the door and went in, but did not find Leonela there. He found only some sheets knotted together and tied to the window, a clear sign that she had used them to climb down and leave the house. Then he walked back to his own room, very mournfully, to tell Camilla, and was stunned not to find her in bed, or anywhere in the house. He questioned the servants, but no one could answer his questions. As he looked for Camilla, he happened to see the open chests, and saw too that most of her jewels were missing from them, and this was when he became aware of the calamity, and knew that Leonela was not the cause of his affliction. He did not even bother to finish dressing, but just as he was, sad and melancholy, he went to tell his friend Lothario about his misfortune. But when he did not find him, and the servants said Lothario had left in the night and taken with him all the money he had, Anselmo thought he would go mad. As a final blow, when he returned home, all the servants had gone, and his house was empty and deserted. He did not know what to think, what to say, or what to do, but slowly his judgment began to return. He reflected on what had happened and saw himself deprived in an instant of his wife, his friend, and his servants, abandoned, it seemed to him, by heaven, and, above all, bereft of honor, for in Camilla's absence he saw his ruination. Finally he resolved, after a long time, to go to the village where he had stayed with his friend when he gave them the opportunity to devise that misfortune. He locked the doors of his house, mounted his horse, and set out with weakening courage. When he had traveled only half the distance, he was overwhelmed by his thoughts and had to dismount. He tied his horse's reins to a tree and dropped to the ground beneath it, heaving tender, pitiful sighs, and lay there until it was almost dark. Then he saw a man on horseback riding toward him from the city, and after greeting him, he asked what the news was in Florence. The citizen responded. The strangest heard there in many days, because it is being said publicly that Lothario, the great friend of Anselmo the rich man, who lived near San Giovanni, ran off last night with Camilla, Anselmo's wife, and Anselmo is nowhere to be found. All of this was disclosed by one of Camilla's maids, who was discovered last night by the governor as she climbed down a sheet hanging from a window in Anselmo's house. The fact is that I don't know exactly how everything turned out. All I know is that the whole city is astonished by what happened, since it was not what anybody expected from their great friendship, for they were so close that people called them the two friends. Do you know, by chance, said Anselmo, where Lothario and Camilla went? I have no idea, said the Florentine, although the governor has made every effort to find them. Then God go with you, signor, said Anselmo. And with you, responded the Florentine, and he rode away. At such calamitous news, Anselmo was on the verge not only of losing his mind, but of ending his life. He struggled to his feet and reached the house of his friend, who still knew nothing of his misfortune. But when he saw Anselmo come in looking pallid, exhausted, and drawn, he realized that something very serious had happened. Anselmo immediately asked to be helped to his bed and to be given writing materials. This was done, and he was left lying in bed, the door closed, as he had requested. When he found himself alone, his mind became so burdened with thoughts of his misfortune that he knew his life was coming to an end, and so he decided to leave some explanations of his strange death. He began to write, but before he had finished putting down everything he wanted to say, his breath failed, and he yielded up his life to the grief caused by his reckless curiosity. The master of the house, seeing that it was late and Anselmo had not called for him, decided to go in to find out if he was feeling better, and he found him face down, half his body in bed, and the other half slumped over the writing desk, the paper he had been writing on unsealed, and the pen still in his hand. His host came over to him, having first called him his name, and when Anselmo did not answer he grasped his hand, found it cold, and knew that he was dead. Shocked and grief-stricken, his friend summoned the household to see the misfortune that had befallen Anselmo, and finally he read the paper written by Anselmo's own hand, which said, "A foolish and reckless desire took my life. If news of my death should reach Camilla, she must know that I forgive her, for she was not obliged to perform miracles, and I had no need to ask her to. Since I constructed my own dishonor, there was no reason to." Anselmo wrote this far, making it clear that before he could end his thought, his life came to an end. The following day his friend informed Anselmo's kin of his death. They already knew of his misfortune and of the convent where Camilla was almost at the point of joining her husband on that inevitable journey, not on account of her husband's death, but because of what she had heard about her absent lover. It was said that although a widow, she did not wish to leave the convent, much less take vows to be a nun. Then, a few days later, the news reached her that Lothario had died in the battle between Monsieur de Lautrec and the great Captain Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, which had just taken place in the kingdom of Naples, where Anselmo's friend, repentant, too late, had fled. When Camilla learned this, she took her vows, and not long afterward her life ended in the pitiless embrace of sorrow and melancholy. And we have a note here. After Anselmo's friend, repentant, too late, had fled, it says, this appears to refer to the Battle of Cerignola of 1503, when the defeat of the French made the kingdom of Naples a Spanish province. This was the end met by the three, and born of such rash beginnings. This novel seems fine, said the priest, but I cannot persuade myself that it is true. If it is invented, the author invented badly, because no one can imagine any husband foolish enough to conduct the costly experiment that Anselmo did. If this occurred between a lover and his lady, it might be plausible, but between a husband and his wife, it seems impossible. And for the moment, and for the manner in which it was told, I did not find it displeasing. End of chapter 35. I did like that story. I do still understand the criticism of having this novel inserted and sort of stopping the action of Don Quixote and company. But I'm wondering if, again, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm wondering if this novel is going to be reflecting something that happens in the future, or if it's going to be coloring like the environment, or like giving more background, into the time period and the world that that Don Quixote is taking place. And it seems like every side story that is in Don Quixote is cyclical. So we are getting characters briefly, and then they disappear, and you almost forget about them, and then they come up later. So I'm wondering if this is going to do that as well, if it's going to be more relevant later on, rather than it just being a novel that they're reading in an inn. We shall see. All right, this will be the last chapter for today. Chapter 36, which recounts the fierce and uncommon battle that Don Quixote had with some skins of red wine, along with other unusual events that occurred in the inn. And there's a note, and it says, in what seems to be another oversight on the part of Cervantes, or his printer, the first part of this epigraph actually belongs to the previous chapter. Just then, the innkeeper, who was at the entrance to the inn, said, here comes a beautiful collection of guests. If they stop here, we'll have some... Oh no. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Gademus? I'm going to put it in chat so you can see what it is. It is italicized, so I'm assuming it's a different language. Oh, I should have done a definition. Hold on, let's see. Because it might tell us. Nope. Okay. Thanks, Nightbot. Okay, good. It seems that everyone else is confused too. What kind of people? Said Cardenio. 4 men, responded the innkeeper, on horseback, with short stirrups, lances, and shields, and all of them wearing black masks. With them is a woman dressed in white, riding saddleback, and her face is covered too, and there are 2 servants with them, on foot. And there is a note after wearing black masks, and it says, these were worn to protect travelers from the sun and from dust. Are they very near? asked the priest. So near, responded the innkeeper, that they're arriving now. When Dorothea heard this, she covered her face, and Cardenio went into the room where Don Quixote was sleeping. They almost did not have time to do so before everyone described by the innkeeper came into the inn. The 4 riders, of a very gallant appearance and disposition, dismounted, and went to help the woman down from the side saddle, and one of them took her in his arms and sat her in a chair that was near the door of the room where Cardenio had gone to hide. In all this time, neither she nor the men had removed their masks or spoken a single word. But as the woman sat in the chair, she sighed deeply and let her arms fall to her sides as if she were sick and weak. The servants who had come on foot led the horses to the stables. The priest, seeing this, and longing to know who these people were, who dressed in this fashion and kept so silent, walked over to the servants and asked one of them what he wanted to know. The servant responded, "By my faith, senor, I can't tell you who these people are. I only know that they seem to be very important, especially the one who took the lady in his arms. And I say this because all the others have respect for him, and do only what he orders and commands." "And the lady, who is she?" asked the priest. "I don't know that either," the servant responded, "because during the whole journey I haven't seen her face. I've heard her sigh very often and moan, and each time it sounds as if her heart were about to break. It's no surprise we don't know more than this, because my companions and I have been traveling with them for 2 days. We met on the road, and they asked us and persuaded us to go with them as far as Andalusia, and they offered to pay us very well." "Have you heard any of their names?" asked the priest. "No, we surely haven't," responded the servant, "because it's a wonder how silently they travel. All you hear from them are the sighs and sobs of that poor lady, and we really feel sorry for her. We think she's being forced to go wherever it is she's going. From what we've seen of her clothes, she's a nun, or she's going to become one, which seems more likely. And maybe she isn't becoming a nun, or her own free will, and that's why she seems so melancholy." "That's possible," said the priest. And leaving them, he walked back to Dorothea, who, hearing the masked woman sigh, and moved by her natural compassion, approached her and said, "What troubles you, Señora? If it is an ailment that women know about and can cure, I am happy to offer my services to you." In response to this, the sorrowful lady remained silent, and although Dorothea repeated her offer, she maintained her silence, until the masked gentleman, the one the servant said was obeyed by the others, approached, and said to Dorothea, "Do not waste your time, Señora, in offering anything to this woman, since it is her custom never to give thanks for anything that is done for her, and do not encourage her to respond unless you wish to hear her tell a lie." I have never told one," said the woman, who up to this moment had been silent. "Rather, it is because I am so truthful, so lacking in deceptive wiles, that I find myself in this predicament. I call on you as my witness, for the absolute truth, I tell you, turns into a lying traitor." Cardenio heard these words clearly and distinctly, for he was very near the one who said them, separated from her only by the door to Don Quixote's room, and when he heard them, he gave a great shout, saying, "God save me! What is this I hear? Whose voice is that has reached my ears?" The lady, in great consternation, turned her head when she heard these shouts, and not seeing the one who was shouting, she rose to her feet, and was about to enter the room. The gentleman, seeing this, stopped her, and did not allow her to take a step. She was so distraught and agitated that the cloth covering her face slipped, revealing an incomparably beautiful face, though one that was pale and frightened, as her eyes looked all around her, darting back and forth with so much urgency that she seemed a person who had lost her reason. These gestures and movements, though Dorothea did not know why she was making them, filled her, and all who looked upon the lady with great pity. The gentleman held her tightly by the shoulders, and because he was so involved in holding her back, he could not keep his own mask raised, and it slipped off, too. Dorothea, who had put her arms around the lady, looked up and saw that the man also holding the lady was her husband, Don Fernando. No sooner had she recognized him than from the bottom of her heart there rose a long, mournful "Aye!" and she fell backward in a swoon, and if the barber had not been close by and had not caught her in his arms, she would have fallen to the floor. Don Fernando is back. If we remember, Don Fernando promised Dorothea that they would be married, and in this world, this time period, promising that you're going to be married is just as binding as being married. But there's a whole story because Don Fernando runs off and is basically married to Lucinda, who so many connections, so many things. Lucinda and Cardenio were supposed to be married. So that's how all of this is connected, and we are seeing Don Fernando. The priest hurried over and removed Dorothea's veil so that he could sprinkle her face with water, and as soon as her face was uncovered, Don Fernando recognized her, for it was he who held the other woman, and he turned deathly pale when he saw her. Even so, he did not release Lucinda, for it was she who was struggling to free herself from his arms, having recognized Cardenio's voice, as he had recognized hers. When Cardenio heard the "aye" that came from Dorothea when she fainted, he thought it had come from his Lucinda, and he rushed out of the room, terrified, and the first thing he saw was Don Fernando, with his arms around Lucinda. Don Fernando also recognized Cardenio, and the three of them, Lucinda, Cardenio, and Dorothea, were left speechless with astonishment, barely knowing what had happened to them. All were silent, as they all looked at one another, Dorothea at Don Fernando at Cardenio, Cardenio at Lucinda, and Lucinda at Cardenio. But the first one to break the silence was Lucinda, who spoke to Don Fernando in this manner. "Let me go, Don Fernando, for the sake of what you owe to your person, since you will not do so for any other reason, and let me cling to the wall of which I am the ivy, the support from which you have been able to tear me despite your solicitations, threats, promises, and gifts. See how heaven, in its miraculous, mysterious way, has brought my true husband before me. And you know very well, after 1,000 costly efforts, that only death is strong enough to wipe him from my memory. Therefore, let this clear discouragement persuade you to turn love into rage, desire into disgust, and then put an end to my life. If I lose it in this presence of my dear husband, it will be well lost, for perhaps with my death he will be convinced that I kept faith with him until the very end." In the meantime, Dorothea had recovered from her swoon. She heard everything Lucinda said and realized who she was, and seeing that Don Fernando still had not freed her or responded to her words, Dorothea used all her strength to stand. Then she fell to her knees in front of him, and shedding a great quantity of beautiful, heart-rending tears, she began to speak to him, saying, "If, Señor, the rays from the sun that you hold eclipsed in your arms have not clouded and darkened the light in your own eyes, then you will have seen that she who kneels at your feet is Dorothea, luckless and unfortunate until you will otherwise. I am that humble peasant whom you, out of kindness or for the sake of your own pleasure, wished to elevate to the height where she could call herself yours. I am the one who, secluded and surrounded by virtue, lived a happy life until, heeding your urgent words, and what seemed to be fitting and loving sentiments, opened the doors of her modesty and handed you the keys to her freedom, a gift so little valued by you that I have been obliged to come to the place where you find me now, and see you in a manner in which I now see you. Even so, I would not want you to think that my dishonor has directed my steps, when I have been brought here only by the sorrow and grief of being forgotten by you. You wanted me to be yours, and you wanted it in a manner that even though you no longer do, it will not be possible for you to stop being mine. Consider, Señor, that the incomparable love I have for you may be recompense for the beauty and nobility for whose sake you have abandoned me. You cannot belong to the beautiful Lucinda because you are mine, and she cannot be yours because she belongs to Cardenio. If you consider it for a moment, it would be easier for you to turn your will to loving one who adores you, rather than trying to force love from one who despises you. You solicited my shame, you pleaded for my integrity, you were not ignorant of my status. You know very well how I surrendered completely to your desire. You have no justification or reason to claim you were deceived. If this is true, and it is, and if you are as much a Christian as you are a gentleman, then why do you go to so much trouble to avoid making me contented at the end as you did at the beginning? And if you do not love me for what I am, your true and legitimate wife, then at least want me and take me as your slave. If I am possessed by you, I shall think of myself as happy and fortunate. Do not, by leaving and abandoning me, permit my dishonor to become the subject of gossip and rumors. Do not ruin the old age of my parents. Their loyal service, as good vassals of your family, deserves better. And if it seems to you that you will debase your blood by mixing it with mine, consider that there are few, if any, noble lines in the world that have not taken this path, and that the blood line on the women's side is not relevant to an illustrious lineage. Furthermore, true nobility consists of virtue, and if you lose yours by denying me what you rightly owe me, then I shall have more noble characteristics than you. And there is a note after illustrious lineage, and it says, it was believed that nobility was inherited exclusively from the father. In short, Señor, I say to you for the last time that whether you wish it or not, I am your wife. Your words bear witness to that, and they cannot and must not be false, unless you no longer value in yourself what you scorn me for not having. Your signature bears witness, as does the heaven you called on to witness what you promised me. And if all this is to no avail, your own conscience cannot help but call to you silently in the midst of all your joys, reminding you of the truth I have told you, and clouding your greatest pleasure and happiness. The unfortunate Dorothea said these and other words with so much emotion and so many tears that all those present, even the men who accompanied Don Fernando, were moved. Don Fernando listened, not saying a word until she concluded speaking, and then began to sob and heave so many sighs that one would have needed a heart of bronze not to be affected by these signs of deep sorrow. Lucinda watched her, as moved by her grief as she was astounded at her great intelligence and beauty, and although she wished to approach her and say some words of comfort, Don Fernando held her tightly in his arms and would not release her. Don Fernando, filled with consternation and confusion, stared at Dorothea for a long time and then lowered his arms, releasing Lucinda, and said, "You have conquered. O beautiful Dorothea, you have conquered, because I do not have the heart to deny so many truths spoken together." When Don Fernando released her, Lucinda felt so faint she almost fell. But since Cardenio was close to her, standing behind Don Fernando so he would not be recognized, he set aside all fear and defied all danger and hurried to support Lucinda. There is a note after "would not be recognized," and it says, another apparent oversight. It was indicated earlier in the chapter that the two men had already seen each other. And yes, I remember that being said or mentioned. And taking her in his arms, he said, "If merciful heaven wishes and desires you to have repose, O loyal, steadfast, and beautiful wife of mine, you will find none more secure than what you have now in these arms that welcome you, and welcomed you in the past, when it was fortune's will that I call you mine." At these words Lucinda rested her eyes on Cardenio, and having recognized him, first by hearing his voice and then by seeing him, she was almost mad with joy, and unconcerned about the appearance of modesty. She threw her arms around his neck, and putting her face close to his, she said, "You, indeed, Signor, are the true master of your captive, no matter how fortune may oppose us or threaten his life or mine, which depends on yours." This was a strange sight for Don Fernando and for all the others, who marveled at so unusual a turn of events. It appeared to Dorothea that Don Fernando paled, and seemed ready to take his revenge on Cardenio, because she saw him move his hand toward his sword, and as soon as this thought occurred to her, she hastened to throw her arms around his knees, kissing them, and holding them so close that he could not move. And with her tears still flowing, she said, "What do you, my sole refuge, intend to do with this unforeseen situation? At your feet you have your wife, and the woman you want instead is in the arms of her husband. Consider if it will be right or possible for you to undo what heaven has done, or whether it will be better for you to elevate to your own height one who has been constant in her truth and steadfastness despite all obstacles, and whom you see here before you, bathing the face and bosom of her true husband in amorous tears. I beseech you for the sake of God, I implore you for your own sake, do not allow this manifest disappointment to increase your anger, but diminish it instead, so that, calmly and serenely, you permit these two lovers to enjoy all the time that heaven wishes to grant them, with no hindrance from you. In this you will reveal the generosity of your illustrious and noble heart, and the world will see that in you reason is more powerful than appetite." As Dorothea was saying this, Cardenio held Lucinda in his arms, but did not move his eyes away from Don Fernando, determined that if he should see him make any move against him, he would defend himself and attack all those who wished him harm, even if it cost him his life. But then Don Fernando's friends, and the priest and the barber who had heard everything, not to mention our good Sancho Panza, approached Don Fernando and surrounded him, imploring him to consider Dorothea's tears, and if what she had said was true, as they believed it undoubtedly was, then she should not allow her to be deprived of her legitimate hopes. He should accept that it was not by chance but the will of divine providence that they all had met in so unlikely a place, and he should be advised, said the priest, that only death could take Lucinda from Cardenio, and even if they were put asunder by a sharp-edged sword, they would consider their death joyous. In the face of bonds as indissoluble as these, it was the height of reason to show his generous heart, overcoming and conquering himself, and, by his own free will, permitting the couple to enjoy the happiness already granted them by heaven. He should turn his eyes to the beauty of Dorothea, and he would see that few, if any, women were his equal, let alone her superior. And in addition to her beauty, he should consider the humility and her great love for him, and above all, he should realize that if he valued himself as a gentleman and as a Christian, he could do nothing but keep the promise he had made. By keeping it, he would keep his faith with God and satisfy all discerning people, who know and realize that even in a woman of humble birth, it is a prerogative of beauty, when accompanied by virtue, to rise to any height and be the equal of any high-born man, without in any way lowering the one who raises her and makes her equal to himself. For when the powerful laws of desire hold sway, as long as no sin intervenes, the man who follows them cannot be faulted. In the end, everyone added their words to these, and they were of such a nature that the valiant heart of Don Fernando, it was, after all, fed by illustrious blood, softened, and let itself be vanquished by the truth he could not deny, even if he had wished to. The indication that he had surrendered and ceded to the good advice offered to him was that he bent down and embraced Dorothea, saying to her, "Arise, Señora. It is not right for the woman I have in my heart to kneel at my feet. If, until now, I have not demonstrated what I say—" Oh no. There we go. "Perhaps it was ordained by heaven so that I, seeing the fidelity of your love for me, would esteem you as you deserve to be esteemed. What I ask is that you not reprimand my poor behavior and great negligence, for the same powerful reason that moved me to take you as my own also impelled me to avoid being yours, and to prove to you that this is true, turn and look into the eyes of Lucinda, who is now content, and in them you will find forgiveness for all my errors, since she has found and obtained what she desired, and I have found in you what pleases me. May she live safe and content for many long and happy years with her Cardenio, and I shall pray that heaven allows me to do the same with my Dorothea." And having said this, Don Fernando embraced Dorothea again, and pressed his face to hers with such tender feeling that he had to choke back tears that were undeniable signs of his love and repentance. But the tears of Lucinda and Cardenio were not held back, nor were those of almost everyone else present, and so many were shed, for one's own joy and for the joy of others, that it seemed as if some calamity had befallen them all. Even Sancho Panza cried, although he later said the reason he cried was his discovery that Dorothea was not, as he thought, Queen Micomicona, from whom he had hoped to receive innumerable favors. Everyone's bewilderment lasted for some time, at least as long as their weeping, and then Cardenio and Lucinda went to kneel before Don Fernando, thanking him with so much curiosity for the kindness he had shown them that Don Fernando did not know how to respond, and so he raised them up and embraced them, displaying great love and courtesy. Then he asked Dorothea to tell him how she had come to this place so far from home. Briefly and discreetly, she recounted everything she had told Cardenio earlier, which pleased Don Fernando and his traveling companions so much that they wanted the story to last longer. Such was the charm with which Dorothea recounted her misfortunes. When she had finished, Don Fernando related what had happened to him in the city after the letter was discovered in Lucinda's bodice, the letter in which she declared that she was Cardenio's wife and could not be his. He said he had wanted to kill her, and would have done so if her parents had not stopped him. Then he, resentful and humiliated, had left the house, determined to have his revenge at a more convenient time. The next day he learned that Lucinda had fled her parents' house, and no one could say where she had gone. After a few months he discovered that she was in a convent, where she desired to remain for the rest of her life, if he could not spend it with Cardenio. As soon as he learned this, he chose these 3 gentlemen to accompany him, and he went to the convent, but did not attempt to speak to her, fearful that as soon as it was known that he was there, the convent would be made even more secure. And so he waited for a day when the porter's lodge would be open, and left 2 of his companions to guard the door, while he, with the 3rd, entered the convent, looking for Lucinda, whom they found in the cloister talking to a nun. They seized her, not giving her a chance to resist, and brought her to a place where they had prepared everything they would need to abduct her. They had been able to do all of this with impunity because the convent was in the countryside, a good distance from town. He said that as soon as Lucinda found herself in his power, she had fallen into a deep swoon, and when she regained consciousness, she had done nothing but weep and sigh, and had not spoken a single word. And so, accompanied by silence and tears, they had come to the inn, which for him had been the same as coming to heaven, where all the misfortunes on earth reach their conclusion, an end. And that is the end of the chapter. So that was kind of cool. And a good payoff because we got both sides of the story and they were all reunited. I still don't love Don Fernando. I guess if this like mini story had like a villain, I would classify him as this in this role. But I am glad that the mini story was resolved. That was kind of nice. That was cool. And it's interesting how it was introduced in pieces and in parts, and how that got us to care and have, like make the stakes higher, I guess, in a way. So that was kind of nice. Yeah, like the investment in these characters and in this story was kind of cool. But yeah, that was cool. That was nice. And I am still enjoying this. This is how far we are. We have made a dent. We're on page 321. That's not too shabby. It's not too shabby. Almost done. We'll be done like that. So yes, that is going to be it for tonight. I hope to see you all very soon. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I appreciate you and I appreciate the support. Thank you so, so much. Have a great night, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye.